shocked. The electric light is like a chaotic python, crushing the gloomy sea of clouds, turning the earth into a river. During the thunderstorm, a black oil paper umbrella floated over the water gate of Lin Hefang in the capital along with the Wupang boat. Along both sides of the river, the mist and rain all over the city stirred up 3,000 willows. Standing on the bow of the boat, Zhou Lingchuan looked at the jagged buildings in the capital, and felt that the scene in front of him was very similar to the across the river during Qingming festival in memory. 17 years after he came to this world, his memories of the past are already blurred, but Zhou Lingchuan can confirm that this is not the world where only scholars are romantic. This is Donghua City, the capital of the Great Dan dynasty. 17 years ago, Zhou Lingchuan was born in Qinghe County of the Great Dan dynasty. He was the direct son of the Zhou family, a local landowner. When he first came here, Zhou Lingchuan thought that he could be a foolish son of a landlord's family in this life, with no worries about food and clothing, but when he was a toddler, he found that this world was a little different. The people here are very powerful. The best people can fly away from the sky and move mountains and seas. The animals are also good, and the legend of foxes repaying their kindness and ghosts transforming into shapes is widely circulated. Zhou Lingchuan has grown up so big. Although he has never seen these strange things, he can still glimpse the mystery and vastness of this world from the few words in ancient books. Being a human being in 2 lifetimes, Zhou Lingchuan never wanted to soar up to 90,000 miles and go to the top of the mountain to see what this world is all about. It's a pity that even though he has 10,000 family wealth, he has become an ordinary person in this unusual world due to the lack of access to his meridians. This time in Beijing, because of her outstanding appearance, she was named to run for the consort of the current princess. When you fall to the ground, you will have no worries in this life, but there is no way to enter the avenue. Zhou Lingchuan didn't know whether he was born lucky or unfortunate. In a second thought, the Wupang boat docked on the side of the street. Zhou Lingchuan retracted his thoughts, flicked his fingers, threw a piece of silver to the boatman, and set foot on the small bluestone street in Lin Hefang. The captain of the boat caught the silver ingot and was flattered, "Sir, give me too much. You will be rewarded." Zhou Lingchuan waved his hand at will and walked straight into the rain curtain. The boatmaster was holding the silver ingot, his eyes filled with gratitude, and was about to push the Wupang boat away from the river bank, when suddenly he heard the sound of splashing water from the bank, followed by the woman's scream. When he looked up, he saw a little woman in a bead hairpin and cloth skirt standing at the door of the restaurant on the street, holding a wooden basin in her hand, her eyes full of fear. The street was filled with mist, and Zhou Lingchuan, who had just walked out a few steps, stood still in the mist. Chuan Gong's eyes were stunned. He didn't expect that this young man was only 3 steps handsome. He was afraid of a conflict between the two sides, so he hurriedly made a round. "Manager Tang, as soon as Mr. Ren arrived in the capital, you poured bathing water all over his body. You wanted to say hello when you saw that Mr. Ren was handsome, but you didn't do it that way." As soon as these words came out, the guests in the tea house and brewery burst into laughter. Zhou Lingchuan raised his umbrella to cover the top of his head, and turned to look at the restaurant. There are yellow wine flags hanging in the restaurant, with only the word soup written on it. The little woman holding a wooden basin, standing under the eaves, in a bead hairpin cloth skirt, simple and clean, with a puffy dress, a face like white tofu, and her eyes widened from fear, added a bit more different flavor. However, the little woman seemed to be quite saucy, and when she heard the captain's ridicule, she immediately glared back, "What nonsense, didn't you see me, was it careless?" After speaking, the little woman looked at Zhou Lingchuan with apologetic eyes, "My lord, I'm really sorry, the rain is so heavy, I thought there was no one on the street. This is boiling water for cooking wine, not bath water." "Boiling water? Not as good as bath water." Zhou Lingchuan looked at the white water mist all over the floor. He wanted to give a few words, but it was obvious that the other party was a woman, so after thinking about it, he said, "Be careful next time. If it's an ordinary woman or child, you'll have to disfigure on the spot. Young master taught me." The little woman nodded embarrassedly, looked up, and saw the young gentleman in front of her, dressed in a tiable robe, with a Pisces pendant hanging from her belt, her long hair with a black headband, her eyebrows staring, the bridge of her nose high, and her face straight. Tough, with a green leather scabbard sword hanging from his waist, he looks handsome and brings disaster to the country and the people. It was only just now that he removed the umbrella to cover the splashing water, which resulted in a lot of raindrops on his cheeks and brocade robe. The little woman blinked and made such a handsome son into a jerk. She felt embarrassed and said again, "Master, why don't you come into the store and I'll find a towel for you to wipe?" Zhou Lingchuan was exhausted by boat and car. He had not eaten lunch yet. Seeing the aroma of wine in the shop, he did not refuse. He put away his umbrella under the eaves and walked into the Tang family restaurant. The restaurant is not big, with 4 small wine tables, and in the corners there are wine jars and a stove for warming wine. On the wine table on the inside, there were already 2 guests sitting, dressed in black fish scale armor, with their sabers on their sides, one old and one young, looking like they were patrolling from Lin Hefang. Zhou Lingchuan entered the restaurant and sat down at the wine table by the window. The little woman hurriedly ran into the backyard to find a towel. The old catcher at the next table saw this and said, "Jing Xing, you will have to change your temperament in the future. Today, thanks to the good-tempered son, you will have been busy in the first half of the year if you have to pay for this robe of Yun Zongjin." The little woman named Tang Jingxian came out with a white towel and said angrily, "My son is gentle, refined, and knowledgeable. At first glance, he looks like a reasonable scholar. Do you think that he is just like you, an immortal who is full of dirty words and likes to take advantage of small things? Is that right, son?" Zhou Lingchuan responded politely to this flattery, "Auntie has won the prize." "Auntie?" Tang Jing's splendid smile froze, and she pursed her lips, obviously wanting to scold, but in the end she held back and said with a slight dissatisfaction, "Young master, I'm not married yet, so how can my aunt scream? My name is Tang Jingxuan, you can call it Sister Tang, if you don't want to be called sister, you can also call Zioxuan." Zhou Lingchuan was slightly surprised, looking at the appearance of the little woman in front of her. She seemed to be able to drip water, which is definitely not small in this world. However, Zhou Lingchuan didn't ask much about women's family matters, so he changed his mind and said, "Boss, what do you have to eat?" With a smile on her face, Tang Jingshen quickly introduced the appetizers of the restaurant. Seeing that there was nothing to do, the old catcher drank his glass of wine, put out 5 big coins on the table, and quickly walked out with the small catcher. Seeing this, Tang Jingxuan turned around and greeted, "Old Zhang, stop drinking." Lao Zukui walked out of the restaurant with the old knife with a yellow scabbard, and waved his hand, "Forget it, I've been drinking with you for more than 10 years, not to mention the butt, I haven't let my hand touch it once. The business is not kind." Tang Jingxuan didn't feel a bit ashamed when she heard this bullshit, and scolded on the spot, "Bah, I'm not a kill here, I want to touch you to go to the front alley because I'm afraid you're getting old." Having said this, Tang Jingxian quickly put away his saucy words and smiled shyly when he found that Zhou Lingchuan was sitting in front of him. "Old Zhang is a patrolman in Lin Hefang. He is a good man and has great skills, but he has a broken mouth. Don't mind me, son." Zhou Lingchuan thought it was interesting, so he didn't mind. After a while, Tang Jingxian brought a pot of wine and 2 dishes of side dishes and put them on the table. As soon as Zhou Lingchuan picked up his chopsticks, another boat docked at the pier outside the restaurant. This time, it was a big ship, and the maids and family members gathered on the deck. As the pedals were lowered, more than a dozen young masters who were in full bloom came down from above, all dressed in luxurious clothes. Among them, a few with phoenix eyes and frowns, boys and girls, attracted a lot of scrutiny. There were no other guests in the restaurant. Tang Jingxian stood at the door to watch the excitement. After discovering these foreign sons, he opened his mouth and said, "The ships from the 4 counties in the south, these sons are all here to compete for the Princess Hydrangea." The 4 southern counties were the granaries of the most prosperous people in the Great Dan dynasty. Zhou Lingchuan came from Qinghe County, one of the 4 counties. He should have taken this official ship to Beijing. He glanced out the window, nodded and said, "Yes, I should have arrived a few days ago, but it was delayed for a few days because of the heavy rains in the past few days." Oh! Seeing Zhou Lincoln's understanding so well, Tang Jingxian turned around and sat on the wine table next to him, resting his chin on his hand, and asked curiously, "The eldest princess chooses a concubine the day after tomorrow, and the young masters of the appropriate age families from all over the world have been called to the capital. I think the young master has a good temperament. Could it be that he also came for this?" Zhou Lingchuan was ordered by his elders, and he really came for this matter. But he has a wealth of thousands of dollars. Even if he can't travel thousands of miles in this life, he can easily drink wine, meat and indulge. How can he be interested in a concubine who can't take a concubine? Zhou Lingchuan hesitated for a while before responding ambiguous, "I came here alone, without even a follower, as if I were fighting for a concubine." Tang Jingxian looked at Zhou Lingchuan seriously, not sure if it was a compliment. "Then your highness, princess, is not lucky. If young master arrives the day after tomorrow, there will be nothing to do with those people outside. The princess will definitely choose you." Zhou Lingchuan put down the wine bowl and looked at Tang Jingxian. "Why?" Tang Jing pursed her lips and chuckled. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com pointed to the group of gentlemen outside. "Sister, I still have some eyesight. Look at those young masters. Sven Wen is full of fat, and she has to be supported by maids in the last carriage. She is more expensive than Miss Kyunjin, and has no masculinity. If you let me choose a husband-in-law, definitely won't choose them." Zhou Lingchuan didn't go on the big boat with those people because he couldn't stand those sissies. Seeing Tang Jingxuan say this, he laughed and joked, "If big sister Tang chooses a husband-in-law, would she choose me?" Tang Jing's smile froze for a moment, only to realize that she had wrapped herself in. Facing the sudden flirting, she didn't look disgusted, she just stood up and walked to the backyard, humming softly, "Young master is young, but he has a lot of thoughts. It's just that my elder sister has lost sight of it." Zhou Lingchuan gave a smile and ate the food and drink by himself. The torrential rain was pouring outside the window. Tang Jingxuan went back to the back room to prepare the food and drink, and never said a word. It's just that before the wine in the pot was exhausted, a loud noise suddenly came from outside, as if the house was collapsing, and it was very conspicuous in the rain. Boom! Tang Jingxuan was startled, almost cut off her fingers, and hurriedly ran out from behind the curtain. "What's wrong? Who's got an accident, et?" The restaurant was empty. Zhou Lingchuan, who was sitting just now, had already jumped out of the window, and he could only see a back. Before leaving, he did not forget to put an official ticket on the table, with a full denomination of 100 taels. Tang Jing's eyes lit up, she hurriedly put the banknote into her neckline, then stuck out the window, ready to ask if she could find any money. The scene I never wanted to see made the charming little woman's face suddenly turn pale. "What? Run! Run quickly!" Riot broke out on the river bank. Zhou Lingchuan rushed out of the wine shop with his sword in hand, but saw the houses in the distance collapsed one after another, pedestrians fled along the street, and the women and children sheltering from the rain on the street screamed and cried incessantly. Under the torrential rain, an unknown beast with a length of nearly 2 feet suddenly rushed out from the river bank. The ferocious beast was shaped like a water crocodile, covered in black scales, sturdy limbs tumbling on the street, crashing into the house in the rainstorm, unstoppable. Lao Zuquei ran to the river bank with a knife and shouted loudly, trying to attract the attention of the beast and let the people evacuate. "Beast, look here." Unfortunately, the giant beast was not led away, but instead rushed directly to the confused young catcher. Young Shakwe was so frightened that he swung wildly with his saber, and was caught up by the giant beast in an instant, biting both of his legs. What screams resounded through the streets! Fang Zheng of Lin Hefang, with a few force, holding a wooden stick and hammer, wanted to slap to expel him, but at this moment where can he get close? "Old Zhang! Old Zhang! Hurry up and save people!" Lao Zhang was only a martial artist, and where did he come from to save people? With his fierceness, he threw himself on the back of the giant beast, clasped the scales with his left hand, and slashed the back with the knife in his hand. Clang clang, the scales on the back of the giant beast are like cast iron, and when the blade is chopped, sparks burst out, and there is no sign of damage. "Plug your eyes! Insert your eyes!" When Lao Zhang saw this, he could only call out to the young to catch up quickly. Young Shakwe's leg bones were shattered, and the desire for survival erupted from the near-death trail, which made him frantically stab the scarlet beast with a knife. Poof! The knife stabbed in, but that was all. The giant beast's left eye bleeds like a stream, and it completely stimulates its ferocity. But with a shake of his head, the young Shakwe was torn in two, and the shrill screams spread throughout the wharf market. The giant beast found Lao Shakwe lying on his back, and immediately fell to the left, ready to roll over and crush the meatworm on his back. Seeing that the huge body was pressed down, Lao Zhang was unable to escape. He could only use his last strength to press the tip of the knife against the scales, trying to use the weight of the giant beast to stab the knife into the flesh. With his life hanging by a thread, Fang Zheng took Lifu and desperately threw the stick at the giant beast, but to no avail. At this critical moment, Zhou Lingchuan rushed to the front, raising his hands to fully support the scales on the back of the giant beast. Bang! The tumbling beast came to an abrupt stop, and was half fleeing on the street. Fang Zheng and Li Fu, who did not dare to approach, were stunned when they saw this, and when they looked up, they realized that there was a drenched young man beside the beast. Under the torrential rain, the young man's forehead burst with blue veins, raised his hands high, and firmly supported the back of the giant beast. Caw! The giant beast weighed more than 1,000 kilograms. It rolled and pressed down, causing the young boy's boots to directly crack the blue bricks under the rain. But the young son's arms were like jade pillars, and he didn't move. A lot of strength. "Old Zhang, come out soon." While Fang was in shock, he hurriedly called the old arrestor underground. Lao Zhang had already been pinned down by the behemoth, but it didn't hold down. He found that someone helped him and hurriedly crawled out from under the beast. Zhou Lingchuan gritted his teeth and quickly retreated when he saw this. He leaped up the surrounding wall and asked anxiously, "Why can't the Zhanggang Dao kill you?" Old Zhang also didn't know that the chopping knife in his hand was forged by the imperial court with a secret method. The blade is poisonous and stabbed through the eyes. It won't die and has no fighting strength. The situation is urgent and there is no time to communicate. Injured the beast, found that someone was blocking it, and rammed into the people holding sticks on the street. Zhou Lincoln's waist is just an ordinary weapon, and he can't do anything about this big crocodile. Seeing the beast raging on the street, he stomped on the eaves and jumped into the air, saying loudly, "Give me the knife." Without the slightest hesitation, Lao Zhang threw his saber to Zhou Lingchuan, who was in the air, leaped forward, and hugged the beast's right leg. The vicious beast noticed that something was entangled in his legs, and when he looked back, he bit Lao Zhang. And at this moment, Zhou Lingchuan volleyed to catch the official saber, dropped the hilt in both hands, and pierced the only remaining right eye of the giant beast with precision. Poof! The handle of the knife sank directly into the eye socket, and then twisted violently. After a slight sound, the giant beast froze, softened to the side, and fell to the ground. Zhou Lingchuan landed steadily 2 feet away, staring at the beast. A few Lifu who risked their lives to help, their faces turned pale after being frightened. Seeing that the beast was pierced with a knife in both eyes, there was no movement, and he sat on the ground with his buttocks on the ground, and his eyes were full of shock. The heavy rain was mixed with thunder, and the beast fell on the blood-stained street, looking dead. After a long time, the surrounding people also stuck their heads out. Tang Jingxuan hid by the far stone bridge and watched the whole process. She was really shocked by Zhou Lincoln's martial arts and courage. At this time, she walked out of the stone bridge carefully and shouted from a distance, "Sir, old Zhang, are you all right?" Zhou Lingchuan did not dare to be careless, the green front 3 feet from his waist unsheathed, and waved his hand to signal the surrounding people to retreat. Lao Zhang sat in the rain, and it took a long time for him to regain his senses. He quickly got up and ran to Zhou Lincoln's side. "Young chivalry is good at martial arts, this beast should be dead." Seeing this, Zhou Lingchuan let out a sigh of relief, and turned to look at the half-body on the street. Lao Zhang also reacted, and hurriedly ran to the young man to catch Kui. It's a pity that young Shakui's entire lower body was torn to pieces, and he was almost cut in the waist. He didn't even have the strength to cry. He lay on the ground like a gossamer, looking at Lao Zhang, who came running, with blood in his throat. "Horse! Road, head, did I poke my eye? It's stabbed, it's a good guy, he's a man." Under such circumstances, Lao Zhang didn't show any signs of fear, but at this moment he panicked, knelt on the ground, and tried to hold down his lower body with his hands, but there was a slight effect there. Xiao Zhu Kui stared at him, his eyes were full of desire to survive, and his eyes gradually slackened as he twitched helplessly. Zhou Lingchuan couldn't bear to look any longer, he turned to the head of the beast, raised his hand and pulled out the young Shakui's saber. This knife is the same as Lao Shakui's slashing knife, the blade is quenched and dark blue, and it doesn't look any different. Zhou Lingchuan looked at it for a moment, then tilted his head and asked, "Why is this knife useless?" Lao Zhang knelt on the ground with blood on his hands. Seeing Xiao Shakui's breath gradually disappearing, he said sadly, "Yet, it has been stabbed into the eye socket, the stab is so deep, how can it be useless at all? If it is useful, at most 2 legs will be broken." Seeing this, Zhou Lingchuan frowned, knowing that there was no answer, so he didn't say more. There was trouble, and the news spread quickly. Soon after, help arrived quickly, and a large number of arresters rushed to the street, driving away the crowd of onlookers. Zhou Lingchuan raised his eyes and saw that behind the fast-catching team, there was a carriage, parked on the side of the street, and a man in brocade came down. Fang Zheng of Lin Hefang looked up and saw that it was Kui Shanying, the Lingtai Lang of Qin Tianjian, who quickly ran to him and bowed his hands. "Master Kui, you can count it. Just now, an unknown beast appeared here. Thanks to the action of the young man, he was able to kill it." After Kui Shanying glanced at the corpse of the beast on the ground, she nodded slightly and instructed the follower, "It's good that the casualties are not too big. Do a search around, and if there are no other beasts, they will be scattered. Move the corpse back, I will study it, and report to the secretary in a few days." After speaking, Kui Shanying turned around and got into the carriage, ready to leave. Just now, one of the arresters died tragically. Zhou Lingchuan was very dissatisfied with Kui Shanying's indifferent attitude. He was about to speak to stop, but Lao Zhang, who was next to him, ran up to him first to stop him and asked, "Master Kui, the slashing knife in Xiao Wang's hand is a new knife that you just sent over. It just pierced into the pupil of the beast, but there was no response at all. What's going on?" Choi Sunyong stopped and frowned, "Where is the knife?" Zhou Lingchuan walked up to him and raised the chopping knife in his hand. "That's it." Kui Shanying glanced at the body of the blade. "It is indeed the slashing knife sent by the teacher last month. It can't be useless. It must be a newcomer who stabbed the wrong way." Said he was going to take the knife back. When Zhou Lingchuan heard the master's gate, he knew that this Kui Shanying was a person from the cultivation school Huanghe Valley. Zhuang Valley is just outside the capital, and the owner of the valley is Enfeft as a national teacher and has a detached status in the Great Dan dynasty. Zhou Lingchuan yearns for the way of cultivation, and originally admired the masters of Zhuang Valley, but Kui Shanying's words and deeds really made him unpleasant. Zhou Lingchuan did not return the knife, but raised his hand slightly, letting Kui Shanying catch the air. The knife pierced through the eye socket and penetrated more than 2 feet into the flesh. If this is all biased, what is accurate? This action and tone were obviously rude. But the fact was in front of us, and the people in the neighborhood also interjected at this time. What this gentleman said makes sense. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. That little catcher is so heroic, his leg was bitten and his eye was inserted, why not? Kui Shanying's face was a little ugly. There were many people around, and it was hard to say heavy words to expel people, so she could only look at Zhou Lingchuan. Who are you? Zhou Lingchuan could see that Kui Shanying was playing sloppy eyes and wanted to move the topic away from the knife. His voice was cold. You don't care who I am? I asked why this knife is useless. Seeing that Zhou Lingquan's tone was very aggressive, Lao Zhang was afraid of causing trouble because of his youthful spirit. Young Xia, this is about my arrest division. Thank you for your help this time. Kui Shanying was very dissatisfied with Zhou Lingquan's attitude, raised her hand to stop Lao Zhang's words, and said coldly, what do you know, yellow-haired boy? Before this knife is delivered, this officer will look at it. There is absolutely no problem. It must have been stabbed in the wrong direction. Cha! Before Kui Shanying finished speaking, a flash of sword light flashed in the rainstorm. There were more than 10 arresters in the surrounding area, but it was too late to stop them. Zhou Lingchuan was 5 steps away, his feet slammed on the street, his body swelled in place, and he came to Kui Shanying in the blink of an eye, with a single sword in his hand like a dragon exploring the sea, stabbed the raindrops in the air, and pointed directly at Kui Shanying's waist. Kui Shanying's face changed suddenly, she took a half step back and touched the hilt of the sword with her right hand. Choke! The long sword was unsheathed, smashing the rain curtain. The force of this sword was astonishing, and the terrified surrounding hunters took several steps back. Unfortunately, Zhou Lingchuan had already retreated 5 steps away, unscathed, and pointed at the street with a single knife in his hand. On the sharp tip of the knife, a drop of blood slid down and landed on the old bluestone floor tile. Mention new book, brothers and sisters, remember to collect and vote. The hand raised the knife and dropped it, the action was too fast. The surrounding people didn't see what happened until this time. Only to find that after Kui Shanying's terrifying sword blow, there was a blood hole in the waist and abdomen. And that young master Tsing Yi, still in his original position, didn't seem to even raise his hand. Kui Shanying's face flushed, and she leaped back to the top of the carriage. Blood was pouring from her waist. She raised her sword and pointed at Zhou Lingchuan, and said in shock, who are you? The surrounding hunters were also full of shock. What a quick knife! Young man, you! Damn it, how could you hurt Mr. Kui? Zhou Lingchuan stood quietly in the rain, turning a blind eye to the surrounding noise. After waiting for a while, he raised the chopping knife and swiped the blade with his thumb. The surnamed Kui, could it be that my knife has been stabbed in the wrong place? When the crowd heard this, they recalled it again, and turned to look at Kui Shanying, who was standing on the sedan chair like a rainbow, and frowned. The Zhonggang knife is poisonous and can block the flow of qi and blood in the meridians. Kui Shanying was stabbed with a hole in the waist, but she was alive and well, obviously not looking like her blood was blocked. That only means that the knife is indeed a fake. Thinking of this, the fast catchers all looked at the saber in their hands, with suspicion in their eyes. After all, this is a life-threatening matter. When the incident happened suddenly, Kui Shanying was completely unprepared. Nearly 100 people watched, and the people from the court were also present. Then he showed the appearance of falling to the ground powerless. Obviously, he wanted to cover up. He had to give Zhou Lingchuan a look and grit his teeth. This knife is really useless, I will ask the teacher to make it clear. I am serving as Ling Tai Lang in the Kintian supervisor. I am an official of the court. I use a knife on the court officials in the street, which is like a conspiracy. You are so bold, take it down for me. Although Ling Tai Lang is only a 7th rank idler, he is also a genuine official, and he has a background in Zhuang Valley and has a high status in the capital. When Kui Shanying was stabbed in the street, it was impossible for the surrounding arresters to pretend they didn't see it. Lao Zhang hurriedly intervened in the middle and said good things to smooth things out. Master Kui calms down his anger. This young hero is also impulsive. The master is a master of Zhuang Valley, with great magical powers. This knife can't hurt the root. Kui Huaying was stabbed in the waist. Although it didn't hurt her vital organs, how could it be okay if the white knife went in and the red knife came out? He angrily said, "What are you doing in a daze? This son has the audacity to commit a murder in the street, and many people in the neighborhood are present. Do you still want to bend the law for personal gain?" When Zhou Lingchuan heard that he was going to be arrested, his mind moved, but he thought of how to escape the election of the concubine. Not only did he not mean to admit his cowardice, he also raised the knife and pointed at Kui Shanying, making a rebellious ranger appearance. "You try to catch me. Hey, young hero, you! The arrest and the people are in a hurry." Kui Shanying was bleeding profusely from her stomach, and she was blatantly threatened. Her veins burst out in anger. She held a sword and urged the arrest. "Give it to this official. Do you want to watch him hack this official to death in the street?" Although the arresters thanked Zhou Lingchuan for his righteous help, what they did at the moment was too much, so they could only turn the blade and signal Zhou Lingchuan not to resist, otherwise it would not end well. Zhou Lingchuan had no intention of resisting, and as soon as he put away the official sword, he was ready to capture it. But at this critical moment, a voice suddenly came from the street, "Stop!" Everyone turned to look, but saw dozens of guards running quickly from the street. In front of them was a carriage with a wooden sign with the word "Left." The capital is at the foot of the emperor, and princes and generals can be seen everywhere. The arresters recognized this carriage as the frame of Zhou Hanchu, the servant of the Ministry of Rights. The servant of the Ministry of Rights is an official of the 3rd rank. He is not considered a top-ranking official in the capital, but in front of the ordinary catcher, he is also a genuine court official. When old Zhang Hefang saw this, he hurriedly signaled the people to back away and raised his hand to greet him. Zhou Lingchuan sighed secretly, knowing that if he wanted to enter the game and hide for 2 days, it would be useless. The carriage stopped on the street full of broken walls, the curtains were lifted, and a benevolent and wealthy middle-aged man walked out, dressed in a purple official robe with a silver fish bag hanging from his waist. It was Zhou Hanchu, the servant of the Ministry of Rights, and also Zhou Lincoln's father's younger brother. After Zhou Hanchu got out of the car, he glanced at the crowded streets and saw Zhou Lingchuan standing in the middle of the street with a knife. Kui Shanying was standing on the carriage with blood all over his body. His expression changed slightly, knowing that his nephew was causing trouble. "No matter what it is, you must first clear the scene, otherwise it will be difficult to operate in the public eye." Before Zhou Hanchu said hello, he looked at the surrounding crowd and said in an eloquent tone, "Ferocious beasts are in chaos. How can people gather on the streets? What should the arresting division do? Everyone is scattered." Numerous arresting officers took their orders and hurriedly dispersed the surrounding people. When Kui Shanying saw Zhou Hanchu come out to clear the scene, he guessed that the young ranger had something to do with him. The anger on his face subsided slightly, and he said unhappily, "Zhou Zhilang, it's not a trivial matter for this son to stab the court officials in the street." Zhou Hanchu got out of the carriage, carried his robes and walked to Kui Shanying's side, looked up, with a look of admiration on his face, and praised, "Brother Kui is really brave and brave." In order to get rid of the beasts and protect the peace of the people in Hefang, he sacrificed his life and did not hesitate to suffer serious injuries. He is the backbone of the country. This matter will definitely be put on the Holy Grail tomorrow, and I will give credit to Brother Kui. Today, the Zhonggang Dao went wrong. Kui Shanying had already justified the loss, but it was really unreasonable to cause trouble in the courtroom. In the end, it is estimated that each of them would end up hitting 50 big boards. Seeing Zhou Lingchuan say this, Kui Shanying couldn't be ashamed of herself, so she immediately prepared for adults not to remember the villain's deeds, and by the way, knocked on a sum of compensation. Zhou Lingchuan, who was just standing on the street, wanted to stay in jail for 2 days in order to avoid the consort election the day after tomorrow. At this time, he said seriously, "Third uncle, I stabbed this knife. I think this Kui is talking nonsense, so." Ling Chuan. Zhou Hanqiu almost died of anger at this. Kui Shanying's face was ashen, and there was a lot of blood oozing from her stomach. She raised her sword and pointed at Zhou Lingchuan, obviously wanting to curse. Zhou Hanqiu glared at his nephew, then turned to Kui Shanying and said with a smile, "Lingchuan is too young to speak truth. Dare to ask Brother Kui, what happened just now?" While speaking, Zhou Hanqiu also blinked. Kui Shanying could not wait to stab Zhou Lingchuan to death with 2 swords, but in the capital, he lowered his head and did not look up to see him. It is not good for everyone to be hurt and angry, and the medical expenses must be greatly reduced. Kui Shanying gritted her teeth for a long time, and finally put away her long sword and said coldly, "I just accidentally slipped and fell on the tip of Ling Quan's nephew's knife when removing the beast," which made Zhou Shilang laughed. "Goodbye." Hualuo jumped off the sedan chair, turned around and left. Zhou Hanqiu's eyes were full of smiles. He raised his hand and said, "Brother Kui, walk slowly, take good care of yourself, and the Japanese official will definitely come to visit in person." Kui Shanying covered her stomach and disappeared into the rain without saying a word. After Zhou Hanqiu walked away with Kui Shanying, he turned his head and looked at the many catchers. "Master Kui just now made it very clear. Today, you will work with Ling Chuan and Master Kui to exterminate the beasts and protect the people. This official will definitely report to the sage of the Ming dynasty. The imperial court will not treat you badly. Clean up. Good surroundings, it's all gone." "Thank you, sir." Naturally, Chu Kui didn't say much at the scene. After raising his hand to salute, he began to collect the remains. Into the night. In Donghua City, the bursts of thunder did not affect the hustle and bustle in the city. The land of the wind and the moon was prosperous, and the restaurants and tea shops were full of pedestrians. On the south bank of Mingde Bridge, in the mansion of Shilang Zhou Hanqiu, the lights are bright. Dozens of beautiful and lovely maids, hiding in the corner of the veranda, secretly aiming in the direction of the study, whispering in a low voice, "Seventh son is really handsome, much more handsome than our young master. Shh, let the young master hear it, you have to blow up the hair." The light in the study is quiet, and at the window, a young man in Tsingyi can be seen standing with his hands behind his back, admiring the night scene of the rain hitting the bananas in the courtyard. In the rainy night, I can still hear the words of the waiter Zhou Hanqiu, "Possibility. Let you enter the capital as a concubine, and the officials have arranged for you not to sit on the boat. You have to go on the road alone. Come on, you will kill people in the street as soon as you arrive in the capital. Do you think this is Qinghe County? This is the capital." At the feet of the emperor. In the study, Zhou Hanqiu put on his regular clothes, and walked around in front of the desk with his hands behind his back. He was full of anger and didn't know where to start. Zhou Hanqiu was an official in Beijing, and he traveled a long way, and he only went back 2 or 3 times in 10 years. When he saw Zhou Lingchuan when he was young, the images were all smart, knowledgeable, and reasonable. Compared with his stupid son, he could not wait to adopt Zhou Lingchuan. This time, when the eldest princess recruited the concubine, Zhou Hanqiu was still holding on to the bright expectations of Zhou Lincoln's blockbuster when the sons of each family showed up. But he didn't expect Zhou Lingchuan to give him such a big surprise as soon as he arrived in the capital. If he was half a step late today, Zhou Lingchuan would have been caught in the big prison and made a joke. Tomorrow, everyone must know that, even if he could be fished out, what consort would he choose? How well behaved you were in the past, you were gentle and gentle, neither noisy nor noisy. Among the dozen or so juniors of the Zhou family, I felt that you would be promising in the future. It's good now, but I don't know how your father taught you. Zhou Hanchu chattered endlessly. Zhou Lingchuan stood at the window, facing the third uncle who hated him not to fight with an easygoing expression. After listening to the nagging for a long time, he turned around and said, "What happened today is that Kui Shanying was rude first, and I didn't kill anyone, just to verify the authenticity of the Zhanggang Dao." Zhou Hanchu sat down behind the desk and patted the table. "You need to stab someone to verify the authenticity? The eldest princess will order the concubine the day after tomorrow. You came to Beijing to be the concubine. If you make trouble, will it be possible for the eldest princess to go to the prison to order you the day after tomorrow?" Zhou Lingchuan really meant it like this. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. But it was not easy to say this in front of the elders. He sat down opposite the desk, shook his head and sighed, "Third uncle, it's not easy to be a concubine. Besides, the people who come to grab the concubine are like Crucian carp crossing the river, so I won't necessarily be selected." Zhou Hanchu naturally knew that a concubine was not easy, especially the consort of the eldest princess. He said solemnly, "It's up to the eldest princess to decide whether to choose or not. It's not up to you and me to think about it. What you and I should think about is whether you want to be." Zhou Lingchuan answered neatly, in no mood. "You have to think about it if you don't want to." Zhou Hanchu raised his finger and pointed to the towering walls of the imperial city. "The sage is young, and the eldest princess is the regent. To put it bluntly, it is the matter of my great Dan dynasty, and it is all the eldest princess who decides. Squeeze, can I go to Zhou's house?" Zhou Lingchuan picked up the teacup and sipped. "My Zhou family has some real estate, but it's not a wealthy family, so it has some influence in the 4 southern counties." Zhou Hanchu waved his hand, leaned on the Taishi chair, and said earnestly, "But the third uncle is an official in the capital. Now that the eldest princess is regent as a woman, she has been criticized by the clan, and there are not a few people who have dissent in the court, but who dares to speak out. She is quite a concubine. To put it bluntly, she is also showing loyalty, proving that she wants to get on a boat with the eldest princess. The sons of the civil and military families of the whole dynasty have all gone, but my Zhou family pretends to be arrogant and dismissive. What does this mean? I, Zhou Hanchu, despise the princess?" Zhou Lingchuan understood this time the issue of standing in line. He thought about it. "I'm the 7th eldest in my family. There are 4 or 5 unmarried sons from the Zhou family. The 5th and 6th brothers are also not married. Why let me? Who made you look handsome?" Zhou Hanchu pointed to Zhou Lincoln's face. "There are more than a dozen young masters in the Zhou family. You are the most handsome and love to walk around, so everyone in the 4 counties in the south knows it. This is like the concubine of the Holy One, who has a beauty in the family, everyone. You all know, you dare to send a lesser person into the palace." Zhou Lingchuan opened his mouth and had nothing to say. When Zhou Hanchu saw that his nephew was no longer refuting, his expression softened. "I know you like to be at ease and not to be controlled by others. This time, you just need to do your best to let everyone see the position of my Zhou family. That's enough. Being selected is also considered a blessing for you. The eldest princess has a beautiful face, and it can be said that it is a talent and a girl to match you. If you do your best and still lose the election, you should treat it as if it never happened." Zhou Lingchuan could not refuse any more, so he could only nod his head slightly. "Understood, I'll try my best. If I'm not selected, don't blame me for not being able to live up to my expectations. Her Royal Highness the Princess has such a bright eye, as long as you don't react negatively, why won't you choose you? It's getting late, go back and get a good rest and prepare. After Zhou Hanchua finished his instructions, he got up to send them off. Zhou Lingchuan nodded, raised his hand to say goodbye, walked outside the study, and flew directly onto the roof. Seeing this scene, Zhou Hanchua came to the window and said suspiciously, "Lingchuan, what do you do when you don't go back to your room to sleep at night?" Zhou Lingchuan had just arrived and felt uncomfortable staying at his third uncle's house. He wanted to go out and find a place to stay, but it was hard to say this clearly. He just said with a smile on the eaves, "This is the first time I come to the capital, go out for a walk, and when the concubine is chosen, I will be there on time, so the third uncle doesn't have to worry." After all, Zhou Lingchuan is a man, not a young lady waiting to be married. Although Zhou Hanchua didn't want his nephew to disappear, he couldn't force it to be locked up. Thinking about it, he just warned, "When you go out, pay attention to your appearance. Don't be like a reckless man, slashing people with knives at every turn. Also, don't go to the brothel, at least not for the past 2 days." Zhou Lingchuan stood in the rain with an umbrella, a little helpless. "Third uncle, I'm not good at women." Zhou Hanchua frowned slightly, glanced left and right, and when he saw that his wife was not there, he took on the appearance of someone coming over. "Can you be called a man if you are not good at being a woman? Don't be serious in front of the third uncle. By the way, a good man is not good. You must not go to the Xiang mansion in the city." Zhou Lingchuan didn't know what to say, he shook his head and sighed, and the rain was hidden in a few moments. Under the same night, the majestic palace city stands solemnly on the east side of the capital. The wind blows the palace lanterns and the rain hits the eaves, making the huge imperial city seem to be between the clouds and mist, and it is gorgeous in the hazy. In the Changle Palace, where the emperor lived, the lights were bright. The stood quietly outside the imperial study with a whisk in hand, and the maid came and went back and forth with the scrolls in hand. The 12-year-old little emperor, dressed in a black and red dragon robe, sat in a drowsy state behind a small book desk. Half of the books he had copied in front of him also turned into crooked earthworms crawling. Inside the study, the large imperial case is full of memorials, and the female official is carefully sorting it out. The woman, who was also wearing a red and black palace dress, was sitting upright at the desk, carefully examining the file that the arrest department had just sent in the afternoon. The woman is in her 20s, with a golden hairpin slanted between her buns, her eyes like red apricots, her eyebrows like a crescent moon, and her graceful figure already shows a bit of maturity that is exclusively for women. Although she didn't put on fende, the softness between her brows did not diminish in the slightest, especially the small cherry red mouth with a little natural spring feeling. However, the woman's eyes are focused like a sharp sword. Even if there is no movement, the condescendingness in her bones is revealed, and outsiders are not allowed to look directly, so that the beautiful eyes in front of the lights do not look at all soft, but have a cold taste. The woman who can make the emperor copy the book by the side and sit on the dragon's case by herself is naturally Zhang Yi, the princess of Longli. Long is almost 20 years old from the princess, and she is already considered an old girl in this world. Because she has to assist her younger brother, she is not in a hurry to marry. However, as a female regent, and not the emperor's biological mother, there is no precedent in history, nor is it in line with etiquette, and there are many objections from the clan and courtiers. This time, the concubine was recruited because the imperial clan had too much opinion and had to make a compromise. After marrying a person, she is a foreigner, and according to the rules, she leaves the palace to go to her in-laws' house. She cannot stay in the palace, and naturally she is far away from the center of power. Princess Longli and the little emperor are sisters and younger brothers. They are very different in age, but their feelings are deep. I am also having a headache about recruiting a concubine. The green light on the imperial case flickered, and Princess Longli took advantage of the light to look at the file in her hand, and rubbed her eyebrows a little boringly. these people really do everything they can. Lang Zhu, the female official next to the imperial case, heard Princess Long Li speak, put down the file in her hand, and asked curiously, "Princess, what's wrong?" Princess Long Li pushed the dossier in front of Lang Zhu and pointed to the writing on it, "Look by Yuzulf." Lang Zhu picked up the file, but saw what was written on it at noon today. Zhou Lingchuan, the son of the Zhou family in Qinghe County, entered the capital for the first time. In Linhefeng, he encountered fierce beasts and rioted. Thing. The dossier was written in great detail. Zhou Lincoln's "to die for the country, it is his duty to die" was written in full, and he even added a pen. After finishing the work, he did not want to reveal his name and was about to leave, but was recognized by his fellow villagers. Lang Zhu looked from the beginning to the end, so he didn't want to talk nonsense. After thinking about it, he said, "If this Zhou Lingchuan is so brave and courageous, he is indeed worthy of praise." Princess Long Li had 3 points of disdain in her eyes. With one move, these young chivalrous warriors all appeared. Li King from Hintang County bravely rescued a classmate who fell into the water on the Bailu River. Zhao Huayan from Bia County risked his death and stopped a frightened horse on Xinghua Street, etc. Wait, it just so happens that I don't like a false name, and then it was recognized by the people present and sent to the table in this palace, alas! With this sigh, he probably felt that it was a waste of words to call these young masters hypocritical. Lang Zhu lightly curled the corners of his mouth and joked, "In order to win the favor of the princess, these young masters are very hard-working. At present, Zhou Lingchuan has the most sincerity and ran to kill the beasts. If nothing else, the courage is enough." Princess Long Li has long been accustomed to the following people, shaking her head, "Zhou Lingchuan is only 17 years old, and he is not a practitioner. What would he do to kill a beast?" Today, Kui Shanying was also present, and the arresting division went to a lot of people, and the beast happened to appear on the dock. "I am afraid it is Zhou Ling." As soon as Chuan landed on the shore, he ran into the arresting division to beseech the beasts, and asked the arresting division to add his name. The Zhou family has strong financial resources, and the waiter Zhou Hanchu is exquisite, so it should not be too simple to do this. Lang Zhu also felt the same way. When she found out that Princess Long Li had negative feelings about the candidate for the concubine, she didn't say much about it. As mentioned above, there is another problem with the Zhanggang Dao. This is the 3rd time this year. And since last year, there have been fierce beasts in the capital, and Zhuang Valley has not given a satisfactory answer. Could it be with the princess? Guess the same. Is there really a problem in Zhuang Valley? Zhuang Valley is only 30 miles away from the capital. It is worshipped by the incense of a country, and it is natural to protect the great Dan dynasty. Now that the capital has begun to riot with fierce beasts, it is equivalent to repeated mistakes in the eyelids, saying that there is no problem in the Phoenix Valley. The princess will not believe it. But this matter involved a lot. Princess Long Li felt that it was pointless to talk to the palace maid, so she did not respond, and turned to the little emperor who was sleeping on her stomach. "Come on, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com is tired, let's take a rest." "Yes." The grandmother who was waiting outside heard the sound and walked in, and carried the little emperor, who was soundly asleep, out. Princess Long Li closed the dossier, got up and left the imperial study. She wanted to go back to her bedroom, but halfway through, she stopped in the veranda. Lang Zhu followed behind. Seeing Princess Long Li looking outside the imperial city, she was a little puzzled. "Princess, what's wrong?" Princess Long Li hesitated for a while, thinking of the beasts in Linhefeng today. She felt uneasy after all, and ordered, "I'm going out of the palace, you don't have to follow when you go back to the palace." "Yes." Although Lang Zhu had doubts, he did not dare to ask any further questions. He bowed slightly behind him, and quietly retreated with the maid. Many thanks to Heroic Cat and Mujian Li for the rewards from the leaders of the 2 bosses. as well as the massive rewards from other bosses. There are a lot of big guys. First of all, thank you. In a few days, I will open a single chapter to thank you. As for the rules for adding more updates, I owe about 300 chapters in the last book, and if you erase a 0, it will count as 3 chapters. Everyone will definitely kill me, so let's count it as 300. I already owe a lot, too many promises and more empty gloves and white wolves, so it's still the same as in the latter part of the previous book, 30,000 rewards plus one more to count. Guan will count carefully. How to change the rules later, we'll let you know in advance. In addition, this is a fairy tale. As a new fairy tale, Guan dare not say how it was written, but it must be different from other fairy tales. I don't know if everyone can adapt to it. I have written several books, and old readers should also know about Guan. No matter what it is written, I will do my best to the best of my ability. I hope you can support me a lot, thank you. Walking out of the mansion on the south bank of Wenda Bridge, Zhou Lingchuan held an oil paper umbrella and stood in the streets and alleys of the capital, where he was drunk with money. There are many people in the capital, but no acquaintances. The second uncle also told me not to drink flower wine. Zhou Lingchuan pondered for a while, walked to the outside of the capital, and according to his memory, came to Lin Hefeng near the water gate. The water gate is the place where ships enter and leave the capital to load and unload goods. Most of the people gathered are from the 3 religions and 9 classes, and among them, the most porters rely on their strength to eat. It was late at night, and most of the shops in the small market near the dock were closed, and the neighborhood of the house destroyed by the beast was even more inaccessible. Only the casino and the alley in the distance were left, and the sound of joy was still resounding. Zhou Lingchuan walked along the street and came to the restaurant in the middle of the small street. There was no sound in the tavern, and the banner with the word soup written on it swayed in the night wind. Dong Zhou Lingchuan stood at the door of the restaurant, raised his hand and knocked twice on the fastened door, but there was no response, so he raised his hand and knocked twice. After a while, the door opened in the backyard of the restaurant, and the woman's sleepy voice came, "Blind eyes? Didn't see the closing time? I want to drink and come tomorrow morning." "It's me." "Who are you? Make it clear, let the neighbors hear, think that the old lady is stealing a man, and find her concubine and go to the alley in front." "I'm Xiao Zhou. Left what is left, I don't know each other, get out of here, I'll be back later." Seeing that the other party could not recognize his voice, Zhou Lingchuan thought about it and said, "I came to your shop for a drink in the morning and called your auntie that tall and handsome young man." The proprietress clearly had a fresh memory of this, so she didn't speak any more, instead she heard footsteps coming in and out. After a while, the door latch of the restaurant lobby was pulled open, Tang Jingxian glanced from inside, and immediately revealed a bit of surprise, "Master Zhou, why are you here? Didn't you get hurt during the day?" The door opened, and Tang Jingxian revealed half of her figure, her long hair draped over her shoulders like a waterfall, and her dress was very tight, but it was difficult to hide the grandeur of her clothes. There was no makeup on her face. Like suet nephrite, a pair of plump lips adds a bit of natural softness. Zhou Lingchuan raised the corners of his mouth, "I'm not injured, I'm done with work, I want to find a place to have a drink, I don't know if Sister Tang is inconvenient." Tang Jingxian just got up from the bed, her clothes were not neatly dressed, it must be inconvenient, but it is not good to refuse directly. She looked at the sky outside, a little embarrassed, "Well, I just fell asleep, and the snacks are gone." Zhou Lingchuan was not two others, he stretched out his hand, "That's fine, Sister Tang, give me the silver, and I'll drink it elsewhere." Tang Jing was stunned for a moment, then her eyes became cautious, and she glanced up and down, "What kind of money do you want, son?" "It was urgent during the day, so I gave Sister Tang 100 taels, but I didn't have time to get the change." A pot of wine and 2 dishes of side dishes add up to a maximum of 3 coins. Sister Tang has to ask me for 99 taels. Isn't that a reward? Tang Jingxuan blinked her eyes, seeing Zhou Lincoln's serious expression, not like a fake. Her eyes were tangled, her hands were covering her clothes, and her lips were pursed. She was obviously embarrassed to be directly black, and she was a little reluctant. After thinking about it, she muttered in a low voice, "Yeah, I thought it was a reward from the young master." Zhou Lingchuan grinned, "Sister Tang is doing serious business. I rashly offered a reward of 100 taels. Not only will you not accept it, but you will also beat me out as a prodigal son, right? It's a hammer, I'm too happy to be happy." After all, Tang Jingxian is not a black-hearted woman. After tangled, she turned around and took out the just-warmed silver note from her jacket, gritted her silver teeth, and handed it to Zhou Lingchuan, making a generous appearance. "Thank you, Mr. Baitian, for your righteous help. That meal, I'll treat you as my sister's invitation." Zhou Lingchuan was quite interesting to see this seemingly generous but incomparably painful appearance. He took the silver note and looked left and right. "Then I would like to thank Sister Tang for the hospitality. The shops on the street are closed. If Sister Tang can introduce me to a shop that can open at night, the 100 taels will be regarded as the drink money." "What?" Tang Jingxian was not a stupid woman, so she naturally understood what Zhou Lingchuan meant when she heard this. Although she was a little dissatisfied with Zhou Lincoln's teasing, people couldn't get along with Yunzi. She hesitated for a while, but she turned slightly to the side and said with a smile, "In the middle of the night, there seems to be a liquor store on the street that can't open its doors. If you really want to drink, my sister has been called up by you anyway." Zhou Lingchuan took advantage of the situation to enter the wine shop, and hooked the corner of his mouth, "Then I'll harass Sister Tang." "Hey, open the door to do business, how can you talk about it, sir? Take a seat." Tang Jingxian tossed back and forth, but made herself a little embarrassed. She turned around and lit the oil lamp, opened the window, poured a pot of wine from the wine jar, and came to the wine table. "The wine is cold, but the weather isn't cold either. The appetizers are gone. I'll go and prepare it for your son." Zhou Lingchuan simply wanted to drink and had no other requirements, so he shook his head and said, "It's getting late, so there's no need to be so troublesome, I'll just have 2 drinks by myself. There are no fresh vegetables in the backyard, and Tang Jingxian is not well prepared." Seeing this, he naturally nodded his head. The drizzle outside the window, the lamp was empty, and a couple of men and women were left alone. Tang Jingxian stood in the shop and didn't go to prepare food. She couldn't just stare at Zhou Lingchuan drinking, let alone drink with her. She thought about it, took a small bench, and sat at the entrance of the restaurant. Asked softly, "In the daytime, young master seems to be from Zhou Zhilang's family. Why do you come to Lei Hefang to drink at night?" Lin Hefang is located near the wharf, where 3 religions and 9 streams are mixed. Zhou Lingchuan took a sip from the wine bowl, shook his head and said, "I'm going to choose a concubine in a few days. My family is busy and I want to find a quiet place to stay for a while." Tang Jingxian said strangely, "It's a good thing for the eldest princess to choose a concubine. How many people are vying for each other, how can you use alcohol to relieve your worries? Are you afraid that you won't be selected?" Zhou Lingchuan was a little helpless. Didn't Sister Tang say, "I'm going, will the princess choose me?" Tang Jingxuan actually thought so in her heart, especially after Zhou Lingchuan drew a knife to help her during the day. She felt that the princess would be blind if she didn't choose this chivalrous and courageous son. "That's why you don't want to be. What is there to be a concubine? Sister Tang lives in the capital for a long time. Don't you know what a concubine looks like?" Tang Jing frowned and recalled that the concubine she had met had a high status, and she always greeted her when she went out. Anyone who saw her had to greet him politely. However, Zhou Lingchuan seems to have a very high status, and there are a lot of entourages here today, and the elders are still high-ranking members. Although Tang Jingxian doesn't understand the life of the concubine, the relationship between husband and wife can still be imagined. The princess has a high position and authority, and it will definitely not be calculated according to the secular rule that men are superior to women. The wife is strong and the husband is weak, and the mother's family is strong and the in-laws' family is weak. The husband will inevitably suffer from humiliation. Putting aside the respected status of the concubine, it seems that it is not much different from entering a family. Thinking of this, Tang Jingxian understood a little bit. She stood up, walked to the opposite side of the wine table and sat down, propping her cheeks with her hands, and sighed, "Also, you are young, handsome, and highly skilled in martial arts. Your elders still hold important positions in officials. You will definitely stand out in other places, and you would go to be a concubine. Even if it is the consort of the eldest princess, it would be too aggrieved." Zhou Lingchuan finally heard a heartwarming sentence, "But this matter is a foregone conclusion, we must go, it is not good to drag people to vomit." He chuckled lightly, changed the subject, and talked about something else. Sister Tang praised her badly, but she might not be selected if she wants to be. By the way, why does Sister Tang open a shop here by herself? When Tang Jingxun heard this, she shook her head and smiled, "What else can I do? My parents died a long time ago, so I'm the only one left. I don't feel relieved to ask someone to help me, and there is no place to help me." Zhou Lincoln's smile faded, a little apologetic, "I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. It's nothing, everyone on the street knows that my relatives used to make things difficult for me." Thanks to Lao Zhang's warm-heartedness, he scolded those people for a while, and then he calmed down. Tang Jing pursed her lips and smiled, raised her finger and pointed to a building in the distance. "Old Zhang lives over there. Don't look at him being serious. In fact, he is a good man. He almost had an accident on the street today." Zhou Lingchuan is just helping within his ability. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com had nothing to be proud of, smiled at it, and asked again, "Sister Tang should be older than me, why don't you find a reliable husband?" Tang Jing frowned, seeing that Zhou Lingchuan didn't mean to tease lightly, so she said in a playful tone, "You're a teenage girl, isn't it a bit inappropriate to ask your sister if she is married?" Zhou Lingchuan was simply curious and had no other meaning. Seeing this, he raised his hand, "It's me who offended me, but Sister Tang doesn't look like she can't get married, she's just curious." Tang Jingxian looked a little smug, raised her eyebrows, stood up, and sat back at the door again, looking like she didn't want to talk anymore. Zhou Lingchuan knew that he accidentally killed this guy, so he didn't want to talk anymore. He got up to say goodbye after drinking the jug of wine. It's just that Tang Jingxian was sitting at the door of the restaurant, looking at the street in the rain curtain, vaguely, suddenly found a shadow moving beside the ruins where the beasts were making chaos during the day. Tang Jingxian was frightened badly during the day, with lingering fears in her heart. She stood up quickly, her face turned pale and ran to Zhou Lincoln's side. "Block in front of you." Zhou Lincoln's face changed slightly, thinking that another beast was making trouble. He grabbed the sword on the table, and carefully stuck his head out of the window. It was raining heavily on the small street, and the place where the accident happened during the day was a little far away. If you didn't look carefully, you could only see a black shadow outside the house that was smashed by the beast. It moved slowly along the trace. Beast, more like a man walking slowly. Zhou Lingchuan breathed a sigh of relief. To be on the safe side, he asked Tang Jing to turn off the lights and close the door, then silently jumped out of the window and walked towards the figure. The night rain continued. During the day, the beasts were rampant, and several houses on the river bank collapsed, and the houses that were not damaged did not dare to live in them, resulting in darkness among the ruins. Holding his sword, Zhou Lingchuan silently walked through the alleyway, came to the side of the street where the beasts were raging during the day, and glanced behind the corner of the courtyard wall. "The corpses of the fierce beast and Yukui have been transported away," and there are a lot of friction marks and a little sticky beast blood on the ground. A tall figure dressed in black, holding a black oil paper umbrella, stood beside the blood of the beast, using the dim light in the distance, lowered his head and looked carefully. Zhou Lingchuan observed from the dark side, and it could be seen that the man was wearing a black military uniform with wrist guards, and the fabric was of high quality. The pattern, the sword spikes are embellished with gold and jade, the shape is quite exquisite, and it looks very valuable. A rich man who came to explore in the middle of the night? Zhou Lingchuan relaxed his vigilance a little, squinting to observe carefully, trying to find out the truth of the other party. The light is too dark to see his face, but with the outline of his body, he can see that this person is thin, his legs are slender and tight, and his legs are good, flexible, further up to the chest. What a strong chest! Zhou Lingchuan was stunned for a moment, then looked down at himself. He started to practice martial arts when he was 3 years old. After more than 10 years, he has not trained his muscles to this level. What kind of kung fu is this pectoral muscle? Broken boulders in the chest? When Zhou Lingchuan was thinking about it, he didn't pay attention to the movement of lowering his head, and brought up the slight rubbing sound of the fabric of the clothes. Although the sound is small, it can be ignored in the rainy night. But there has just been a violent beast here, and the men in black on the street have always maintained 100% vigilance. At this moment, a choking sword sound rang out in the rain curtain, and the sword light erupted from the rainy night, pointing directly at the corner of the courtyard wall where Zhou Lingchuan was standing. When Zhou Lingchuan made a move, he knew something was wrong. He quickly showed his figure, stepped back 2 steps and said, "Wait, don't be impulsive." Hearing a human voice, the man in black paused cautiously, pointed his sword to Zhou Lingchuan, took a look at the dim firelight, and said, "Who are you?" The voice was deliberately heavy and low, but it still sounded a bit girly. Zhou Lingchuan heard this voice and understood that the other party was a woman, no wonder her chest muscles were so developed. He hung the saber on his waist, raised his hand to indicate that he was not malicious, and then stepped forward and said, "I was drinking nearby, and saw someone here, so I came over to check the situation. During the daytime, there are beasts here, Why does Xiantai come here alone at night?" The woman in black stood in the backlight, and saw Zhou Lincoln's clothes and appearance. He was handsome, well-dressed, and spoke in a friendly manner. He didn't look like a villain. Seeing this, she also returned her sword to its sheath, and responded casually, "I heard about what happened during the day. Come and have a look." Xiantai was shocked. "Please come back." This means not wanting to communicate. It was only Zhou Lingchuan who saw the movement of the woman's sword drawing, which was similar to Kui Shanying's sword in the daytime. Zhou Lincoln's martial arts are very good, but to put it bluntly, it's just a fist and kick style, which is very different from cultivation. Although his family is superior, he has never been able to enter through the door. At this time, when he meets a practitioner, he naturally has to talk a few words. It's fine at night, so don't rush back. The sword of Xiantai just now is really beautiful. Could it be someone from Ziwagu? The black-clothed woman didn't want to reveal her identity. Seeing Zhou Lingchuan didn't leave, she came to talk to her, so she couldn't forcefully drive him away, so she had to respond lukewarmly, Zhou Lingchuan chuckled lightly. It was raining heavily in the sky, and he didn't even get close to him. He stood under the eaves and said warmly, "It's a coincidence, I'm also going to go to Zhuang Valley to apprentice and learn art. In the future, maybe I'll have to call Xiantai a brother. Dare to ask Xiantai your surname?" When the black-clothed woman heard this, she seemed a little puzzled, and looked at Zhou Lingchuan up and down. "Your surname is long. How old are you this year?" There were no lights and no fire, and there were umbrellas to cover. Zhou Lingchuan couldn't see the face on the opposite side, so he stopped looking at it, turned to look at the fishing fire on the river, and replied, 17. 17. The black-clothed woman hesitated for a while, as if she was mulling her words, and finally said, "Cultivation Dao is extensive and profound, although everyone can try it, but very few people can get started. Whether men or women, if you want to become a cultivation Dao, you have to start diligently and practice hard at the age of 6. The door. You don't look like a poor person, why are you here now?" Zhou Chuan was silent for a while, then sighed, "Not everyone can try it. When I was 3 years old, my family asked someone from Zhuang Valley to feel my bones. They said that I was born with blocked meridians and couldn't practice, otherwise I would have come a long time ago." The black-clothed woman was obviously a little surprised, even more unexpected than hearing that Zhou Chuan came to study art at the age of 17. Although the practice of one path is unfathomable and very few have achieved success, the threshold is not high. Even a wild dog on the side of the road, by chance, touches the door, and can achieve a positive result, not to mention people. This is the same as archery with a bow. No matter whether the shot is accurate or not, as long as you are willing to study hard and practice hard, no matter how stupid you are, you can pick up a bow, unless you are born disabled. The woman in black read to this point and asked, "Are you born a waste?" This sentence is not ordinary. Zhou Chuan blinked, not knowing how to respond. The black-clothed woman also found this description impolite, and immediately added, "In Zhuang Valley, this is how they describe the disciples who don't practice hard and don't open their minds. Don't blame me. Well, the meridians are not connected by birth, although it is rare, but you don't have to feel sorry for yourself. You can also be proud of your ancestors when you study and get famous. Get a job done." Zhou Chuan patted the sword on his waist. "The world is so big, knowing that there are masters in the world, how can you be a frog at the bottom of a well for a lifetime?" The woman in black doesn't like this very much. People can't be so lofty, and cultivation is meaningless. You really won't think that way when you arrive at Zhuang Valley. But you are born with no access to meridians, and you can't go there. Listen to my advice. There are not a few people who have made great achievements in Wencheng. You are still young, go back to study honestly." Zhou Chuan naturally shook his head. "You may not practice, but how can you give up martial arts? I started practicing martial arts when I was 3 years old, and I used 1,000 swords a day. In the 14 years since then, I have made no less than 5 million swords. There are very few people who can beat me in the world." The black-clothed woman frowned when she heard these ignorant words. "Little brother, don't be too crazy. There are many practitioners who have entered the door in the rivers and lakes. You are born with blocked meridians, and no matter how hard you work, you will be at the top of the horns. At most, you should practice brute force. When the manpower will eventually be exhausted, how can it be compared with the practice of borrowing the power of heaven and earth? People fighting." Zhou Chuan tilted his head, his eyes unruly. "Xian Tai may have persuaded him out of good intentions, but I've grown up so much, and I've never been afraid of anyone. People in cultivation just use the power of heaven and earth to increase their killing power. Most of the foundation is not solid, at least not as solid as me, really to divide life and death. I am not afraid at all." What a mad boy! It may be the first time that the black-clothed woman has met such an inexperienced Lang Toking. She held the hilt of the sword around her waist. "Why don't you try it?" Zhou Chuan shook his head. "You are too slow to draw your sword, you can't beat me, I don't bully people." "Ah!" The woman in black just laughed angrily. "I'm older than you, and I don't have less time to practice martial arts than you. Do you really think that after practicing behind closed doors for more than 10 years, you can be arrogant?" Zhou Chuan was not arrogant, but confident. Just by the woman's sword drawing, he knew there was nothing to fight. He spread his hands and said, "I just don't want to ruin Xian Tai's Kenshin." The woman in black didn't understand the meaning of those words, but she could hear the contempt in it, and her eyes became cold. "Put your sword, or you won't be able to pull it out. If you don't say you are better than me, as long as you can survive a cup of tea under my sword, I will give you what you want. What do you want? Zhou Lincoln's thoughts moved, and he was really interested. He looked up and down at the beautiful woman in black, and said with a smile, I want to enter the Phoenix Valley, can Xiantai also help? The woman in black showed pride in her eyes, as long as you can survive a cup of tea, I will intercede with the teacher and let you enter the Phoenix Valley. I will do what I say. Brother, don't bluff me. The woman in black snorted lightly, do you think that everyone in the world is full of nonsense like you? Zhou Lingchuan nodded, there is nothing to worry about right now, no matter whether it is true or false, there is no harm in trying. That's fine, let's play with Xiantai. After Zhou Lingchuan stretched, Yu read www.yuyuganshu.com stepped into the rain curtain, stood still on the bluestone street, raised his hand and clasped his fist, Zhou Lingchuan, King He County, please enlighten me. Zhou Lingchuan. Why is it so familiar? The black-clothed woman thought for a while, and her annoyed expression froze slightly, then she lifted the oil paper umbrella a little, revealing her red lips and white chin. Zhou Lingchuan waited in the rain, noticed the strangeness of the other party, and asked, could it be that Xiantai has heard of my name? It was this fellow, no wonder he was here. The natural meridians are blocked and the beasts are killed, which is a big joke in the world. The woman in black didn't answer, but snorted even more contemptuously, stood 10 steps away from Zhou Lingchuan with an umbrella, and made up a name casually, Donghua City Longta, please enlighten me. The words fall. The two sides quieted down. The rain curtain is dense and the long night is quiet. The two figures stood still on the long street full of broken walls and ruins. There were no lights or fires around, and the atmosphere gradually became a bit chilly. Zhou Lingchuan is arrogant, but not conceited. With his long sword drawn out, he pointed diagonally at the ground, and the raindrops slid down with the sharp sword edge. The black-clothed woman squinted her eyes and looked at it carefully. Only then did she realize that Zhou Lincoln's sword was rather odd. The sword can't use the chop, slash, smash and other moves, and the stab and break the armor will not bend. It is suitable for warriors who are known for their strength. After the woman in black saw the doorway, she put her right hand on the hilt of the sword, her expression became serious, the oil paper umbrella was slightly lowered, her eyes were fixed on Zhou Lincoln's boots, and she was ready to go. Thunderbolt on a spring and rainy night, a muffled thunder resounded through the capital, and the earth turned into day. Bluestone Chong Street, thousands of rain flowers bloom on the street, two figures stand opposite each other, as quiet as two sculptures. But at the moment when the thunder light illuminated the street and plunged into darkness again, the sound of a long sword being unsheathed choked sounded in the rain curtain. The two set off at the same time, bringing out two cold glows in the rain curtain. But the black-clothed woman took a step forward and was stunned to find that Zhou Lingchuan, 10 steps away, seemed to disappear along with the lightning, and disappeared. The black-clothed woman was not a mediocre hand, and her heart suddenly became cold. She immediately changed the stab to the sweep with the long sword, and turned around without any target. The wooden pole of the oil paper umbrella cannot withstand such a rapid rotation, and the pole twists until it breaks. And the long sword that wandered to Zhou Lingchuan by the woman's side, slashed out brazenly, was also blocked by the woman's sword with no dead ends. Ding! At what point Mars burst out in the rainy night. Double-edged swords are not suitable for slashing, especially with counter-slashing. They are bound to be at a disadvantage in terms of strength, and lack of rigidity can easily turn into a noodle sword to hurt themselves. It stands to reason that Zhou Lincoln's single-edged sword has the upper hand in this move. Big advantage. But the inhumanity of people in the practice is also reflected here. Zhou Lingchuan slashed with all his might with the sword in one hand, the blade of the sword fell on the fluttering blade, and the feedback from his arm was an overwhelming force. The black-clothed woman's sword was still straight, but the sword in Zhou Lincoln's hand was slightly distorted. Zhou Lingchuan only felt the tiger's mouth go numb, and the sword swept his whole body out and flew to the side, smashing the already devastated house. Wow! After one blow, a hole appeared in the wooden wall of the house on the street, with the soft sound of rubble cracking. The black-clothed woman stood in the rain with a sword in one hand, gaining the upper hand, but did not catch up immediately, because she was also shocked into a cold sweat. Just now, Zhou Lingchuan moved too fast, and the moment her figure disappeared with the thunder light, she thought that this kid was pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger, deliberately pretending that she was not someone in the practice, and she felt a chill in her heart. But after the two-edged relationship, she also understood that Zhou Lingchuan didn't lie. If she was a practitioner who used her true qi to infuse the blade, even if she could block it just now, she would lose her balance due to the shock of qi, and she would split the opponent in reverse. Although he didn't have the cultivation base, his stamina was a little lacking, but Zhou Lincoln's quick and unmoving skills like a mountain still made the woman in black feel the pressure. After all, this guy was so fast, she couldn't even see the movement. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed that an ordinary person could come so fast. However, this also stimulated the fighting spirit of the black-clothed woman. If it was an embroidered pillow who could only talk a lot, it would be boring. The black-clothed woman hesitated for a moment, then stomped on the ground with both feet, followed by rushing into the house with her sword in hand, not forgetting to ridicule, "That's all you can do. The sword is sharp and unstoppable." Just after rushing into the broken hole, the woman in black gave a startling glance, and Zhou Lingchuan actually disappeared again. When you lose track of your opponent during a battle, the next moment is often the time when you die. The black-clothed woman's eyes changed slightly. The dilapidated house had only 4 walls, and there was no place for Tibetans, so she could only be above. She fell to the ground without hesitation, and raised her sword. Zhou Lingchuan fell into the darkened house, and he had already guessed that the other party would follow, so he jumped up the toes of his boots and hooked the beam of the house. But the moment the woman in black rushed in with her sword, Zhou Lingchuan did not launch a surprise attack. This led to the extraordinary reaction of the woman in black, which turned into a one-man show, raising her sword and stabbing lonely. The woman in black predicted the opponent's move, but stabbed it in the air, secretly thinking that it was not good. She quickly slapped the ground with her left hand, and wanted to bounce her body up and attack again. But if the two of you are fighting, if you make a wrong move, you will lose the whole game. How can your opponent give you a chance to regroup? Zhou Lingchuan waited for the gap between the opponent's strength, and his legs slammed on the beam of the house, cracking the old beam, and his body turned into a cannonball that fell from the sky, and smashed directly into the arms of the woman in black who had not yet stood up. This time from top to bottom, the speed was faster than the outrageous explosion on the street just now. The woman in black retracted her sword and stabbed straight, but Zhou Lingchuan blocked the blade. Zhou Lingchuan held the long sword upside down with one hand, and pressed the black-clothed woman's blade down until the two were close to each other. One knee hit the black-clothed woman's waist and abdomen, and her left forearm was pressed against the woman's neck, falling down. Forcibly smashed the woman to the ground. Bang! The two fell to the ground, and there was a muffled sound in the dilapidated house. Zhou Lingchuan took advantage of the situation and pressed the long sword, and placed the blade on the woman's neck. The sword, light, and sword shadow in the rainy night also stopped abruptly at this moment. In the quiet room, there were only 2 breathing sounds left. Zhou Lincoln's eyes were calm. He looked down at the shadowy woman who was like a lamb to be slaughtered, and hooked the corner of his mouth. "Brother, you lost." They were so close to each other, and there was no umbrella to cover them. Only then did Zhou Lingchuan realize that the woman looked pretty good. With almond eyes and crescent eyebrows, lips like vermilion lacquer, and her face like suet jade, she is obviously pampered at ordinary times, and she doesn't even get exposed to the sun a few times. Lying down at this time, the majesty of the did not seem to diminish, but spread out a little and turned into a flat dumpling, which was enough to prove that there was no filling in it, and it was genuine. But the woman's face is not very good looking now. The woman in black was pressed firmly against Zhou Lincoln's body, with the sword in her throat. Not only did she have no intention of admitting defeat, but her face was flushed with anger, and she did not even care about disguising her voice, and reprimanded, "You are despicable, sneak attack is a trick." When Zhou Lingchuan heard this, he didn't let go. His victory depended on IQ and Jianghu experience. This is a part of personal strength, so why is it so mean? He said amusingly, life and death is the way it is. Is it possible that you still think, I call the name of a move and hit you, and you call the name of a move and hit me? You are despicable, you cannot win by force. The woman in black was a little exasperated. However, being so angry is not unreasonable. The status of the black-clothed woman is too detached. The people who used to discuss with others and feed her tricks are all well-behaved and follow the rules. How can you dare to be like Zhou Lingchuan, who can't fight head-to-head, and then play tricks in a roundabout way? Not to mention the audacity to push her to the ground and mock her. When did she suffer such humiliation since she was a child? It was the first time I met such an insidious opponent. The black-clothed woman didn't show her true skills at all, and she must have felt aggrieved. Even if Zhou Lingchuan was pressed to the ground, she still had no intention of admitting defeat. She supported the ground with her left hand and held the sword with her right. Lifting, he even forcibly got up and pushed Zhou Lingchuan up. Zhou Lingchuan has tempered his body for more than 10 years, and his strength is astonishing. Little thief, die! The black-clothed woman's face was full of anger. She forcibly stood up from the ground, raised her hand and slashed towards Zhou Lingchuan with a sword. The speed of this sword was much more powerful than before, and Ling Kong actually let out a sword cry. Zhou Lingchuan saw the opponent's real fire, his smile faded, and he raised his sword to block and said dissatisfiedly, "Brother, let's learn from each other, don't be rude and deny your account." Clang! Before he finished speaking, the two blades met. Zhou Lingchuan flew backwards again, smashed through the wooden wall, and came to the alley on the other side. Who doesn't admit it? If you have the ability, fight me in an upright manner. The black-clothed woman has never suffered such a loss since she was a child. She rushed out of the house like a mad mother leopard and stabbed with her sword. Ding ding ding! The sound of gold and iron clashing in the alley is connected together. Zhou Lingchuan was forced to step back by the aggressive woman. The other party obviously lost his mind. He couldn't kill him directly, so he couldn't resist for a while. Seeing that the other party and the shrew seemed to be slashing with their swords, Zhou Lingchuan was not interested in fighting. Little thief, go away! The woman in black was dissatisfied with Zhou Lincoln's incompetence, and felt ashamed of being pinned to the ground, so how could she let Zhou Lingchuan leave? Seeing Zhou Lingchuan jumping over the fence and trying to escape, the black-clothed woman scolds, flying over the fence to pursue him without even thinking about it. It's just that the black-clothed woman crossed the fence and looked into the sky, but found that there was no Zhou Lingchuan on the jagged roof. Suffered. The black-clothed woman regained consciousness in an instant, secretly thinking that something was wrong, but it was too late. Zhou Lingchuan, who was waiting under the corner of the wall, saw the other party jump over and look into the distance. He raised his hand unceremoniously and grabbed the woman's ankle. While pulling hard, his right hand caught the woman's sword-wielding right hand. What the woman in black was unable to move in the air, and was caught off guard. She lost her balance and fell, and the sword in her hand fell to the ground. In order to prevent her from struggling again, Zhou Lingchuan twisted his right hand, and at the same time locked the woman's legs with his left leg, pressed her directly on the right leg, and pressed her elbow against the back of her neck. As a result, the black-clothed woman was locked firmly as soon as she landed, and only her left hand could move, and she couldn't even lift her head. Zhou Lingchuan leaned against the courtyard wall and tried his best to lock the woman as strong as a tigress, and said coldly, "It's the second time, are you satisfied?" The sky was raining heavily. The woman in black was lying on Zhou Lincoln's lap, her bulging clothes were flattened, Her hair tie was unraveled, and 3,000 blue silk was stuck to her face. She was soaked in rain and looked very embarrassed. The posture is even more difficult to see. Her eyes were blood red, she struggled with all her strength, almost crushing her silver teeth, but she couldn't break free, so she could only scolded, "Bastard, you are bold, let me go." How could Zhou Lingchuan let go? If he let go, he would have to hack him. He glared at him and said, "I'm asking you if you're convinced." The black-clothed woman's face was ashen, she couldn't break free, so she patted her back with her left hand. Although he was lying on his stomach and patted his back with his left hand, the posture and angle of the force were wrong, but the force of this palm was still not small. Zhou Lingchuan locked the woman with both hands before it was too late to block, so he could only deflect his head and use his shoulder to pick it up. As a result, the severe pain in the shoulder came and he almost broke the bone. Zhou Lingchuan sucked in a breath of cold air. Seeing that this woman was so arrogant, he was also angry. He let go of one hand, took the scabbard around his waist as a ruler, raised his hand and drew it down. Snapped the crisp sound. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com is particularly eye-catching in the rainy night. Although I couldn't tell where the hit was, the elasticity was definitely excellent. The woman in black who was struggling with all her might, her body trembled suddenly, her struggling movements also froze, and the eyes of the boss were full of disbelief. Zhou Lingchuan took the opportunity of the black-clothed woman's confusion, twisted her left hand behind her back, and pressed her arm down, completely preventing her from moving. Then, holding the scabbard as a ruler, he made a gesture to strike. "Are you satisfied?" It was silent for a long time in the rainy night. The woman in black widened her beautiful eyes, her eyes were full of shock. After being stunned for some time, she gradually regained her senses. Her eyes turned to shame and anger, and then she could not contain anger. You, shameless thief, I'm going to tear you to pieces." Snapped the scabbard fell on the cloth wet by the rain, and the tight black silk trousers burst into waves, and even splashed a little rain and mist. It may not be appropriate to describe it as pleasing to the eye, but it is true. Zhou Lingchuan didn't pay attention to these details, he just held the scabbard, like a teacher who taught disobedient students. "Are you satisfied?" The black-clothed woman's words stopped abruptly. Under the pain, her body trembled slightly, and her eyebrows frowned, but she immediately reacted. Her eyes were about to burst into flames, and her face was red and blue, and she said hysterically, "You let me go, I want to kill." Snapped the woman in black just spoke when Zhou Lingchuan said again, "Are you satisfied?" "Me?" The woman in black was so angry that she didn't know what to say, she struggled to break free, but snapped, "Are you satisfied?" Clap clap clap. Week after week, the two people in the rain curtain were deadlocked for half an hour. The black-clothed woman was very tough, and she was never softer than half a point from beginning to end. She was scolding, threatened, and hysterical, but she didn't say the word serving. Zhou Lingchuan doesn't believe in evil either. He follows the rules and reason, but in the face of people who can't afford to lose and make trouble unreasonably, he has to teach them what Wu virtue is. The tempers of the two collided, and neither of them would give in, but it couldn't last forever. The black-clothed woman was controlled by others, and after all, she had the disadvantage. After being physically punished many times, she gradually stopped speaking and did not struggle. She just lay on Zhou Lingquan's lap, gritted her silver teeth, and breathed sharply. Zhou Lingchuan wasted no time in doing so. Seeing that the other party was no longer struggling, he said softly, "Due to people, you have to win and lose, or they can kill you if they can win you. Fortunately, you met me. If you are so messed up in the rivers and lakes, you won't survive for 3 days. You don't struggle. I'll treat you as admit defeat and let you go. If you're not finished yet, let's continue and see if you hurt or I hurt." The woman in black lay on Zhou Lingquan's lap without any response, but took a deep breath. Seeing this, Zhou Lingchuan let go. The woman in black jumped up like a frightened rabbit, turning around and picking up the sword from the ground, ignoring the burning pain in her back. Zhou Lingchuan frowned and held the hilt of the sword. It's just that no matter how stubborn people are, there is no reason to send them to the door to be beaten. The woman in black is full of shame and humiliation, but instead of attacking Zhou Lingchuan, she walked quickly out of the alley with her sword in hand, and said coldly, "Sentence, you wait for me." Zhou Lingchuan stood up, put away his sword, and patted his robe. If Xiant Tai doesn't have a long memory and only hold grudges, then don't practice martial arts in the future, and it's easy to die early. If you're not convinced, you can come to me at any time, and I'll be reasonable if you are reasonable. Bah, shameless! The black-clothed woman's teeth were ticklish, she couldn't hear it, turned around and kicked a broken brick towards Zhou Lingchuan, and then hurriedly ran out, as if she was afraid of being caught. Zhou Lingchuan sideways dodged the broken bricks, and didn't bother to care anymore. But watching the woman walk away, Zhou Lingchuan suddenly remembered something very important, and said from a distance, "By the way, Xiant Tai said that as long as I survived a cup of tea, he would introduce me to the Phoenix Valley. Does that count?" The woman in black, who had already walked away, slammed her footsteps, obviously wanting to turn around and curse. However, the superior should follow the law, the other party is shameless, she can't follow the rogue. After hesitating for a moment, the woman in black still groped around her waist, took out a jade pendant, turned around and threw it to Zhou Lingchuan, "Take the jade pendant to Zhuang Valley, and someone will take you in. Also, today's affairs won't be the end of it. Just wait for me, and I'll let you understand how much you messed up." Trouble. Zhou Lingchuan took the jade pendant. The round jade pendant was engraved with a green bamboo, and the character Wu was on the back. It was regarded as an identity card, and it still had residual warmth when carrying it with him. He rubbed it twice, smiled and clasped his fists in a salute, "Many thanks to Senior Brother Long. If Senior Brother is really angry, I will stand here and let Senior Brother Long fight back. They are all family, so why be so angry? Call back?" The black-clothed woman endured the pain behind her and thought about the way she hit Zhou Lingchuan. "Cannot bear to look. Bah, shameless thief, you're doomed, I'll tell you." The black-clothed woman turned her head and spat, and then disappeared at the end of the alley with heavy footsteps. The corner of Zhou Lincoln's mouth twitched lightly, and after weighing the jade pendant in his hand, he walked towards the winery in the distance with satisfaction. As for how the black-clothed woman will retaliate against him, Zhou Lingchuan is not worried. He can give him the jade pendant, which shows that the woman still follows the rules in her heart, but her temper is a bit unruly. Flush the toilet. A man can bend and stretch out, suffer in hardships, and be a superior person. As long as he can walk on the avenue of longevity, what kind of difficulty is this? However, Zhou Lingchuan sighed secretly again when he remembered the matter of choosing a concubine the day after tomorrow. If this is really selected, the dream of free practice in the future will definitely be in vain. At this moment, he can only hope that the eldest princess is blind and can't look down on him, otherwise, the great opportunity that he met today would not be wasted. The night was getting dark, and even the casinos on the side streets were quieter, leaving only Fenjiu Alley to continue the laughter. The door of the Tang family restaurant was closed. Zhou Lingchuan came to the door and picked up the oil paper umbrella leaning against the door. Knowing that Tang Jingshen did not dare to sleep, he raised his hand and knocked on the door. Dong dong behind the gate, there was some movement, like the sound of picking up a kitchen knife surreptitiously. Seeing this, Zhou Lingchuan said half-jokingly, "Sister Tang, the beast has been driven away, don't worry." Hearing Zhou Lincoln's voice, footsteps sounded in the hall, and soon, the door opened. Tang Jingshen carefully glanced through the crack of the door, a little nervous in his eyes. "Young Master Zhou, are you not injured?" "No injuries. Sister Tang, go to bed early, and remember to close the doors and windows." I'll go home first and leave. After he finished speaking, he handed the money for the wine to Tang Jingxian. Tang Jingxian has lingering fears about what happened during the day, not to mention that there was a fierce beast over there just now. The ominous beast doesn't know when it will come. She lives here as a woman, what's the use of closing the door? Looking at the 100 taels of silver notes handed out by Zhou Lingchuan, Tang Jingxian's eyes were a little anxious. Young master is helping the neighbors to get rid of harm, how can you not even have a cup of tea? Why don't you come in and take a rest and wait for the rain to lighten before leaving? Zhou Lingchuan could see from Tang Jing's calm face that she was alone in fear. After thinking for a while, he stepped into the wine shop, then I'll trouble Sister Tang. It's so late, Sister Tang should go to rest first. I can leave by myself when the rain is light and help you close the door. There were customers in the store. Tang Jingshen was embarrassed to run back to the backyard to sleep, but didn't dare to sleep. She took a jug of wine and put it on the table, then brought a towel and handed it to Zhou Lingchuan. Zhou Lingchuan wiped off the water stains on his body, sat drinking by the window, and didn't stare at Tang Jingxian, but put his eyes on the distant imperial city, thinking about his future plans. Tang Jingxian sat beside the warm wine stove, looked around, not knowing what to say, and was afraid that Zhou Lingchuan would leave. Her expression was rather embarrassing. Zhou Lingchuan didn't have much to talk about. The two of them were silent for a long time. Zhou Lingchuan suddenly heard a few bird calls in the backyard and the sound of flying around in the cage. Twitter. Zhou Lingchuan glanced at it, and he couldn't see anything with a curtain blocking it, so he asked, Sister Tang still keeps birds? Tang Jingxian was speechless, and quickly replied with a smile, yeah, when I was drying rice in the past, a stupid bird came and stole it every day. After a while, it refused to leave, so I raised it and relieved my boredom in my spare time. Now I think I woke up and found that I was not there, call me woolen cloth. Zhou Lingchuan nodded, it's hard to live alone, and it's good to have a pet as company. Actually, it's okay to be alone. The neighbors are all good, and no one cares about them. As long as they don't make trouble with beasts, they will have a good life. Tang Jing said so, but her expression was obviously not very comfortable. Her pupils reflected the faint light of the small stove, with a bit of sadness. She didn't want to talk too much about this, so she turned to the topic and said, I heard that I will choose a concubine the day after tomorrow. How should I choose a concubine? Just like choosing an Warren, stand on the stage and let the princess choose. Zhou Lingchuan was holding the wine bowl, thinking about it. It really is like this, almost. A bunch of people got together and competed with each other, and the most outstanding person was the concubine. Comparing to what? Playing the piano and singing. A horse riding archery contest or something. It's not the champion of martial arts, what is more than horseback riding and archery? Zhou Lingchuan drank a little wine, maybe a little overwhelmed, and replied smoothly, these are all items that test physical strength. The concubine can't hold an important position, and the only duty is to serve the princess. As the saying goes, only exhausted cows, no farming is bad, bad, bad. At this point, Zhou Lingchuan suddenly reacted, feeling that he was a little floating, took a sip from the wine bowl to hide his embarrassment. Tang Jingxian opened a wine shop in Linhefeng, where the 3 religions and 9 streams are mixed. He has heard this saying and understands the meaning. This kid, he knows a lot. She frowned slightly, and there were surprises and oddities in her eyes. She turned around, turned her back to Zhou Lingchuan, fiddled with the stove, and asked knowingly, what does it mean? Well, it's nothing, it's just that the concubine is in good health, so she can't die early and leave the princess as a widow. Zhou Lingchuan explained casually, embarrassed to talk nonsense again, and looked at the rain curtain outside the window. Tang Jingxian experienced this little episode, so she couldn't speak any more. She stared at the stove in a daze, not knowing what she was thinking about. The night was getting dark, the two of them didn't speak again, and the restaurant was quiet again. Tang Jingxian leaned on the wine table next to the stove at first, and slowly headed a little bit, then lay down on the table. Zhou Lingchuan is also not a sleepless master of the world. Sitting at the window, thinking about going to Zhuang Valley to see things tomorrow, I don't know when sleepiness strikes, and he also lies on the wine table. In a daze, I only felt that as soon as I closed my eyes, there were some noisy voices outside. Steamed stuffed bun. Sell coal. Hey? Are you finished? Zhou Lingchuan woke up suddenly and looked at the window, only to find that the east was turning white outside. Turning her head, Tang Jingshen was still sleeping on the small table beside the stove. Perhaps because she felt uncomfortable falling asleep, Tang Jingshen also changed her posture, with her back to him, looking from the back. Her shoulders were narrow and her hips were round, and her hips were wider than her shoulders. The scene was very reverie. As the saying goes, a gentleman does not bully the dark room. Zhou Lingchuan quickly turned his unintentional gaze away. He didn't wake Tang Jingxian. He pressed the silver note with the wine bowl, stood up lightly, closed the window, and closed the door from the outside. It was February, and the rain stopped. Although it was not yet bright, there were already some pedestrians on the small street. After closing the door of the restaurant, Zhou Lingchuan tidied up his clothes a little and turned around to leave. It's just that he just took a few steps when he suddenly saw a middle-aged woman standing outside the door with a steaming tray outside a steamed bun shop at the end of the street, staring at him intently. Zhou Lingchuan noticed something, looked up, and the woman turned around and entered the shop. Zhou Lingchuan was puzzled, but his appearance was outstanding, and it was not uncommon to be stared at while walking on the street, and he didn't care at the moment. He quickly left Lin Hefeng and headed to Zhuang Valley, 30 kilometers away from the capital. Thanks for watching, please subscribe. After the rain, it is clear and the wind blows the willows, and the scattered Dodon imperial city shines brightly in the spring sun. At the end of the early morning, courtiers dressed in various official robes filed out from the Zhengyuan Hall. Zhou Hanchu, the servant of the Ministry of Rites, stood alone under the white stone steps outside the hall, with his head bowed, staring blankly at a colorful butterfly flying around in a purple official robe. Colleagues pass by sometimes, and they will glance at them. There are teasing and sympathy from friends in their eyes, but more officials are as dazed as Zhou Hanchu. Penalty stand. In the early morning this morning, Zhou Hanchu, as usual, entered the palace before dawn. Because of his confidence in his nephew, Zhou Hanchu even hummed a little song on the road and began to think about what gift to prepare for his future niece. When they arrived at the imperial city, Zhou Hanchu and Begwen entered the Zhengyuan Hall together, but unexpectedly found that Princess Longli did not appear in the hall for the first time. Princess Longli has been under the curtain for nearly 4 years, and her ability to govern is not easy to evaluate, but she can definitely be called diligent. In the past, the court was the first to go to the Zhengyuan Hall, waiting for the ministers and the little emperor to come. But today is uncharacteristically. The little emperor who came last in the past has already sat on the dragon chair, but the bead curtain next to him is still empty. The Manchu civil and military officials and the little emperor were embarrassed at the time. Let's go to court. I'm afraid that Princess Longli will feel that the courtiers are disrespectful, and no one will dare to raise her head. Keep waiting, the emperor is already sitting on the dragon chair. Wouldn't it be a disorder of etiquette if you wait any longer? Fortunately, Princess Longli didn't forget that there was a morning meeting today. Although it was a little late, she finally arrived. Zhou Hanchu breathed a sigh of relief at the time, but what he never expected was that Princess Longli entered the Zhengyuan Hall, and before he opened his mouth to call for the court, he said in a stern tone, "The son doesn't teach, the father's fault. Zhou Hanchu, go out to this palace and stand." Then, the waiter, Zhou Hanchu, stood outside the hall until now. Zhou Hanchu has been an official for many years, and he handles things smoothly. He is considered a good gentleman in the court. His official position is not low, his background is clean, and he has no intertwined factions. He is a courtier who is more pro-princess. When Princess Longli suddenly came, all the civil and military people of the dynasty were trying to figure out the deep meaning behind Princess Longli's move. Of course, no one figured out why. Zhou Hanqiu was also wondering at first whether Her Royal Highness the Princess had other intentions, using him to knock the mountain and shake the tiger or something. But in the end, he found out that he really just let him stand all morning, everything else was as usual, and he seemed to be forgotten after the court. Since there is no other meaning, then the princess is really punishing him. Just being punished for standing up means it's not a big deal. The son does not teach, the father is at fault, which means that the fault lies with the son. Zhou Hanqiu has several sons, and the second son, Zhou Yunting, is the least promising. Zhou Hanqiu pondered for a while and felt that it was only the second son who did something stupid and passed it on to the princess. Thinking of this, Zhou Hanqiu's face darkened slightly, and he felt that he had to take care of his son when he got home. Ling Xuan has just arrived in the capital, and he will be running for the consort tomorrow. How can he cause trouble at such a critical juncture and ruin Ling Quan's perfect impression? On the Beishi Royal Road, the group of ministers gradually dispersed. Zhou Hanqiu stood alone outside the hall, neither walking nor not walking. His expression became more and more embarrassing. Fortunately, in the end, an old man with a goldfish bag hanging from his waist walked over from the hall, accompanied by a few officials, and said in a warm voice, "Hanqiu, go back, the princess was so absorbed in discussing political affairs just now, she should have forgotten about you." Zhou Hanqiu looked back and saw that it was Li Jingxi, the prime minister of the dynasty. Li Jingxi was the leader of all officials, and he went through 3 emperors. He was highly qualified and well-connected. In some cases, he could even overwhelm the princess. In the Great Dan dynasty, he was considered the most prestigious courtier. Seeing Li Jingxi's words, Zhou Hanqiu hurriedly raised his hand in a salute. "Thank you, Li Xiang. Today I think that my dog has done something stupid again," which made Li Xiang laugh and leave. Li Jingxi was nearly old, his hair was grey, but his complexion was very good. After raising his hand, he watched Zhou Hanqiu leave first. After Zhou Hanqiu left, an official next to Prime Minister Li Jingxi laughed softly. "Tomorrow's eldest princess chooses a concubine. I heard that Zhou Hanqiu also called a nephew from Qinghe County, thousands of miles away. Humph, I don't want to look at my identity if I want to be with the royal family." Li Jingxi walked in front, his smile turned dull. "Zhou Hanqiu is a slick person, the princess chooses a concubine, whether he is chosen or not, he has to show his loyalty." King Lai and Mrs. Zhong sent a letter to urge the marriage, although the eldest princess agreed to choose a consort, but from what I see, the eldest princess will not. It's too early to release power. The consort is the princess's side, and the position is very important. Can the candidates be arranged? Li Xiang, rest assured, there are nearly 20 young talents who entered the capital this time, and Li Xiang can use them. Regardless of their appearance, talents, and learning, they are all among the best. The choice of the concubine must be one of them. Li Jingxi nodded slowly, but before he could speak, another official from the 4 southern counties frowned and said, "Yesterday, Xiaoguan's nephew came to Beijing, and Xiaoguan asked him if there were any outstanding people who came to Beijing from the 4 southern counties. My nephew said that there were more than 30 people from the 4 southern counties, and their backgrounds and talents were difficult to judge. But in terms of appearance, Zhou Lingquan of Zhuojia in Qinghe County, no one can compare to him, and his key character is not bad. Seems to be Zhou Hanqiu's nephew." Li Jingxi frowned upon hearing this, but he returned to normal immediately, shook his head and said, "The Zhou family of Qinghe County is half agricultural and half business, and has been rooted in the south for generations. The capital has a shallow foundation, and the outstanding person is a third-rank servant. The eldest princess is in power on behalf of the emperor, and there are many obstacles. Choosing a consort is an opportunity to win over a party, and you will not judge people by appearance. Choose. Besides, you are not people without talent and beauty, and young talents in a half-country land can't be compared to a small Qinghe county. The surrounding officials also thought about it, and they didn't say much at the moment, and left Miyaji with Li Jingxi. On the east side of the imperial city, in the Fuyan Palace where Princess Longli lives. More than 100 palace maids were silent, staying in their respective positions, and there was not the slightest sound in the huge palace. Lang Zhu, the maid who was close to her body, stood blankly outside the carved wooden door of the dormitory. She wanted to listen to the movement inside, but she couldn't hear anything. She couldn't help but feel even more puzzled. Last night, the princess asked her to go back to Fuyan Palace first. After Lang Zhu obeyed the order and returned, he stayed in the palace waiting for the princess to return to bed. Unexpectedly, when the princess came back, she was soaked all over and her hair was messed up, as if she had been ripped off without mercy. Her face was even more frightening. Lang Zhu grew up with the princess, and it was the first time in so many years that she saw the princess with such a terrifying expression. Lang Zhu thought something was wrong and wanted to ask, but the princess didn't say a word. She started smashing things as soon as the door was closed, and said something like "shameless, bastard." With so much anger, Lang Zhu didn't dare to hit the muzzle. After spending the night in the side hall, he didn't dare to wake the princess up in the morning. He didn't dare to knock on the door until he was about to go up. After the princess woke up, the rare one did not wash up and rush to the Zheng Yuan hall, but stood behind the desk, holding a writing brush for a long time, and then wrote a letter with fierce eyes and sent it to Zhuang Valley. Writing a letter while standing up, it looked weird. Lang Zhu asked aloud why he didn't sit and write, and he was punished for standing until now. After the court disbanded, the princess had to go to the imperial study to help the little emperor review the memorials, so she couldn't stay in the house all the time. After waiting for a long time, Lang Zhu dared to speak up and said, "His Royal Highness, it's time to go to the imperial study." In the bedroom, Princess Longli Zhongyi, dressed in court clothes, stood beside the bookshelf, flipping through the secrets of the exercises that she hadn't read in several years. Her eyes were looming, and her face was blue and red. Zhongyi is a practitioner. She was spanked by a ruler, so she wouldn't be hurt. But people in cultivation are also people, and being beaten will also hurt. Last night, she was held in his arms by the shameless person and was pumped for about 20 times. After returning to the palace, she was still hot, and you don't need to think about it to know that she has become popular. Zhang Yi's daughter has never been beaten when she grew up, and the dignified eldest princess was spanked by a man. She felt the humiliation in her heart. When I woke up in the morning, although the pain was back to normal, it was as white and silky as a peeled egg. But that unforgettable memory cannot be erased. Zhang Yi still doesn't want to sit down, for fear of feeling uncomfortable, recalling the humiliating and embarrassing scene. Hearing Lang Zhu's call, Zhang Yi put down the martial arts secret book, turned around and walked out of the palace gate to the imperial study. Along the way, the gorgeously dressed Zhang Yi's face was icy cold, and murderous intent was almost written on her face, so frightened that Lang Zhu and the court ladies kept a distance of nearly 10 paces before they dared to follow quietly. After walking for a while, Zhang Yi suddenly stopped. Lang Zhu hurriedly stopped and asked carefully, "Princess, what's wrong?" Zhang Yi took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in her heart, and said, "Tomorrow, we will choose a concubine at Qiantai. You go to arrange some things for this palace. Someone should take good care of them." Zhang Yi raised her hand to let the other palace maids back away, then leaned into Lang Zhu's ear, gritted her teeth, and talked about the arrangement. Lang Zhu listened with a puzzled expression on his face. He opened his mouth, as if he wanted to ask why, but seeing the princess' expression, he closed his mouth wisely. Leaving Lin Hefang, Zhou Lingchuan bought a good-looking black horse at the carriage and horse shop. After inquiring about the direction with the locals, he galloped away to Zhuang Valley alone. Zhuang Valley is only 30 miles away from the capital and is located on the outskirts of the city, backed by Chongqing Mountain. Zhou Lingchuan was speeding along the straight road, and within half an hour, he found a small town at the end of the road. At the end of the town is an octagonal archway with the 3 characters Zhuang Valley written on it. Behind the archway is a 10-mile willow forest, and the eaves of some buildings and the mountains at the end of the field of vision can be seen in the distance. In the early morning, there were few people in the town, and there were only a few medicinal farmers who had dug up medicinal herbs and came to sell them. Zhou Lingchuan rode through the town and came to the octagonal archway. There were 4 young people standing under the archway. They were guards. When they saw Zhou Lingchuan approaching, one of them stepped forward and raised his hand in a salute. "Young master, please stay behind. Outsiders from Zhuang Valley are not allowed to enter. Do you have a road citation document?" Zhou Lingchuan took out the jade pendant from his arms and handed it to the other party. Zhou Lingchuan, a person from Qinghe County, has longed for Zhuang Valley for a long time. I came to visit today. I wonder if Xian Tai can introduce it on your behalf. The young man at the head took the sign, saw the word Wu on the back, looked up at Zhou Lingchuan again, and said with a smile, "It turned out to be you." Fang Kagulai said hello and said that someone came over with a sign and took you directly to see Uncle Wu in the alchemy room. "Come on, I'll take you there." Seeing this, Zhou Lingchuan didn't say much. He and the young man got on his horse and entered the octagonal archway. The Zhuang Valley is inside the mountain, and the 10-mile willow forest on the periphery is just to isolate outsiders, not living in it. It is more like a beautiful landscape garden. The two walked side by side, and in about a quarter of an hour, they came to the foot of the mountain across the earth. The Chongqing mountain range stretches for thousands of miles, spanning the west side of Dodon, and the mountain in front of it is only a part of it, called Qiwangling. When the mountains stretched to this point, I wonder if it was because of the cracking of geological activities, which caused an opening between the mountains, and the cliffs on both sides were cut like sharp knives. I could vaguely see a waterfall falling from the depths. A rainbow appeared below, and the scenery was extremely beautiful. Zhou Lingchuan got off his horse and entered the valley on foot with the young man, and the scenery in front of him suddenly became clear. To the scene of hundreds of people doing morning exercises, the attic around the square, surrounded by green plants, you can also see a few white cranes hovering in the sky. Looking at it, it really tastes like a Daowen fairyland. Zhou Lingchuan had just arrived and was not familiar with Qiwang Valley. He followed the young man who led the way and turned right. After walking for an unknown distance, he came to a small lake on the side of the square. The small lake is full of lotus, and in the middle is a school with bamboo curtains hanging on all sides. There are futons in the academy, and dozens of people sit in a circle. The oldest one is 17 or 18, and the youngest is 5 or 6 years old. In those days, Master, I was in Linyuan city of Dian country, and I saw a strange woman approaching from the wind, hanging above the imperial city, and the emperor of Dian country went out to greet him in person. In that scene, you dolls didn't cultivate well. I'll never see. Zhou Lingchuan listened while walking. His impression of the practitioners came from the storytellers in the market. Except for the fact that there was a Dian dynasty in the North Pass, he knew nothing about it. At this time, when he arrived at Zhuang Valley, Zhou Lingchuan was naturally curious when he heard these strange people and strange things, and asked the young man who was leading the way next to him, "I grew up in Qinghe County since I was a child, and I seldom heard about things outside the great Dan dynasty. Can Xian Tai tell me about it?" The young man who led the way, young but friendly, heard the words, slowed down a little, and walked side by side with Zhou Lingchuan. "Just call me Wang Rui. I entered Phoenix Valley when I was 6 years old, and I haven't left in 10 years. I don't know much about the outside world, but I have heard it from the teacher before." When Zhou Lingchuan saw this, he also slowed down and made an appearance of listening intently. Wang Rui's face was clearly filled with longing and yearning. After thinking about it for a while, he said seriously, the Great Dan dynasty is just a small place, with the sea in the southeast and the evergreen mountains in the west, so it can only be said to be a back country in the world. The Dayan dynasty outside the customs is different, a state may be bigger than ours, but I don't know the specifics of the secular court. I only know that there are 9 cultivation sects outside, and they are called the 9 sects in the south. The ancestors of our Zhuang Valley came out of the shocking terrace, one of the 9 sects. Now if there are outstanding disciples in our Zhuagu Valley, the teachers will also rely on this layer of incense origin to send people to the Jing terrace of Dayan dynasty for further study. Zheng Shivo, who just gave a lecture, has been there once when he was young, but it is a pity that he went out to practice. He was wounded, otherwise he would still stay there. Zhou Lingchuan nodded slightly, and after carefully remembering these words, he asked a question that all new practitioners would ask: the people over there will fly to the ground. Wang Rui spread his hands, shook his head and said, I haven't been there, so how do I know? But the teacher said that one practice is divided into 5 realms of qi refinement, ling, yuhuang, jade steps, and forgetting machines, 1 step at a time. Those who enter the secluded husks can rely on the utensils to fly to the sky and the ground, and those who enter the jade rank can use their bodies to ride the wind and fly into the sky. When we settled in Phoenix Valley, the sect master and several uncles entered the Linggu Valley. We can't see this kind of master here. Zhou Lingchuan nodded thoughtfully, pondered a little, and then looked at his long sword. Among these sects, can you have a particularly powerful sword? Zhuagu all learn swordsmanship. Wang Rui was naturally very interested in this issue. He looked at Zhou Lincoln's saber and said a little arrogantly, our master Zhuagu came out to the terrace, let me say that the swords used outside are powerful, they must be shocked by the terrace. However, the head once said that there is a sword imperial city outside the 9 sects, which is especially powerful. 9 sects challenge, the monks over there are specially called sword cultivators, and there is a saying of 9 sects and 8 masters, Zhongzhou's 10 sword emperors. It's a pity that the head has only heard about it, and I am also specific. I don't know. While chatting, the two passed by the lake, and after walking for another quarter of an hour, they finally stopped beside a bamboo forest. The bamboo forest is near the back of the valley, and from the outside, you can see a building halfway up the mountain, near the waterfall that you saw when you came in. Uncle Wu is right above, so I won't go in. You can say hi to someone below and explain your intention. When Wang Rui arrived at the entrance of the bamboo forest, he didn't say more, raised his hand and turned to leave. After Zhou Lingchuan said his goodbyes with no end in sight, he took his sword and stepped into the path among the bamboo forests. Along the way, he saw a few bamboo huts. Many young girls' homes were gathered in the bamboo huts, either brewing medicine to cool off in the sun, or concentrating on pans. Sitting, when he passed by, he would glance at him curiously. Zhou Lingchuan came to the bottom of the cliff and was about to inquire about the homes of a few girls who were making medicines in the distance, and asked someone to inform them on their behalf. Above the cliff, a person's upper body protruded. Zhou Lingchuan looked up, but saw that under the warm spring sun, the roar of the waterfall brought a hazy rainbow, and a woman in a light green dress was standing on the edge of the cliff, looking down. A woman can't tell her age at a glance, but her almond-shaped eyebrows, graceful figure, and her temperament and appearance are all more mature. It may be more appropriate to describe her as a woman. Black hair rolled up, no pearls and hairpins, only tied with headbands, a face of pure white and no trace, no makeup, thin dress without any accessories, looking very clean, under the support of spring and waterfalls, even some kind of a fairy feeling. Zhou Lingchuan blinked, not sure if this woman was Uncle Wu. After looking at each other, he raised his hand politely, under Zhou Lingchuan, dare to ask if the senior is Master Wu. After speaking, waiting for a reply. It's just that the woman above didn't speak. After looking down at it, her figure disappeared from the cliff. Zhou Lingchuan thought that the other party was going to come down for an interview, so he stood upright under the cliff and waited quietly. Above the cliff, the waterfall roared. The platform opened from the rock wall is 3 feet wide and more than 10 feet long. The left side is curved around the stone ladder to the bottom of the cliff, and the right side is directly below the waterfall. At the entrance of the stone ladder, a wooden house is built, and in the direction of the waterfall is an empty stone flat. I think it is a place to practice martial arts. There is also a stone platform for people to sit on the edge of the cliff. Looking out, it is the whole picture of the picturesque Zhuang Valley. Wu Qingguan, who was wearing a long light green dress, withdrew her gaze from the edge of the stone platform, and then looked at the letter in her hand, her eyes like water showing a little puzzlement. Wu Qingguan is the youngest apprentice of the national teacher Yu Pingyang. She ranks 5th among the teachers in Qiwang Valley, and is in charge of the Pill Room, one of the 5 rooms. She taught Princess Longli's martial arts and is regarded as Zhang Yi's teacher. However, Princess Longli did not call Wu Qingguan master. First, because of the special status of princes and princesses, according to the rules, they can only worship national teachers. Early, Princess Longli's biological mother, Empress Lu, and Wu Qingguan came out of Hintang County together. They had known each other since childhood and were sisters, so Princess Longli called her auntie since childhood. Princess Longli went to Zhuang Valley to practice cultivation at the age of 6, and was brought up by Wu Qingguan herself. Although Zhang Yi has returned to the palace for nearly 4 years, she has been together less and more, but she still understands the princess's temperament very well. She is strong and active on the outside, born with the arrogance of the royal family, but she is delicate and considerate on the inside, and knows self-examination. In Zhuang Valley, Zhang Yi has been helping Wu Qingguan to discipline many sisters and sisters. No matter how angry she is, she will act in the principle of fairness and justice, and will never favor anyone because of her personal opinion, let alone I went to Wu Qingguan to complain. But at this moment, when Wu Qingguan saw the letter in her hand, she didn't understand how much Zhang Yi was wrong to write these things. Don't reveal my identity, let him hang for a long time, when he can't bear to look around, he says he's not sincere and let him get out if he doesn't go, let him go to the living room to wash clothes go to the animal pen to bathe the white crane. Isn't this bullying? Wu Qingguan has been cultivating in the mountains since she was a child. She likes to live alone and ignore outside affairs. She doesn't even have many disciples. She is neither interested nor unable to do this kind of tossing people. However, Zhang Yi called her auntie, and she was able to write this kind of letter, which was uncharacteristically, indicating that she was really offended by the child below. If she did nothing, Zhang Yi would come over next time. Not good to explain. Wu Qingguan put away the letter, hesitated for a while, still followed Princess Longli's instructions, and did not pay attention to Zhou Lingchuan immediately, thinking about letting Zhou Lingchuan stand for a while, and then talk about other things. As a result, the bamboo forest became silent, and there was no movement.